Okay, I'm going to test this microphone first. Can you hear me out there at all? Not so much. Could the gentleman in the control room raise my sound up just a little bit? Thanks, Andrew. How's that? Any better? No? Same? All right, let's try to talk loud. Okay. Call to order the Select Board meeting of July 11, 2018. No changes to the agenda that I am aware of. This is each month we're doing the Remember campaign, where I like to talk about different memorials or a tree that's been dedicated around the island, because we all drive and walk around and we have no idea what's there. So tonight,
Yeah, it's not.
well, it's going to come up here in a second. I want to talk about Wilkes Square. And I want to talk about another one off of Surfside, because these are two areas that we have been all dealing with that has a lot of stress. So Wilkes Square, it's development and lots of talk about stress, and there's traffic, but nobody knows that there's a landmark there. Not everybody knows that there's a landmark there, or we forget it's there. There's cars parked around it. So I want everybody to know that Francis Leroy Wilkes, he died at sea serving on the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Tampa when he was torpedoed by a German submarine in the Bristol Channel in Great Britain during World War I. So that was in 1918, September 26th. Up there? All right, so that's what you can't see, because there's always cars parked around it. A year ago, he was awarded the Purple Heart by the Coast Guard in Baltimore on Pier 5 on June 6, 2017. And is there also the picture of when he was
So, which one he is?
He's in the top row, fourth one over, right there. Pretty cool that Nantucket in the early 1900s had African Americans integrated with all the white kids. That's pretty amazing. And he joined the Coast Guard. He was 18 years old and fought for our country. So I think when we're stuck in traffic on Washington Street, look at that flagpole right in front of American Legion, and that's Wilkes Square. And there's a little rock there. So a little positive energy for you. The second one, there's been a lot of stress and talk of, when you say Surfside Road, what do you think of right now? We're going to be talking about today. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I wanted to throw some positive energy out on Surfside Road. On the corner of Surfside and My Comet is a dedication to Jimmy Dewart. And everybody knows Nicky, but I was never met Jimmy. But there it is, dedication to him. He passed away in May 5th, 2007. He served 33 years for the town, started off with the police department, I found that out today, and then 25 years for the public works. And he was a musician. He was one of the main coaches of the Boys and Girls Club, football coach, and he was one of the founders of the Nantucket Little League. But I found a really good quote searching online the other day about Jimmy. I think this sums it up. This is from Vaughn McAdoo. Am I getting that right? Machado. I knew I was going to get that wrong. But here's what Vaughn said. Quote, "He was my first guitar idol. When I was 11 years old and I got my first guitar for Christmas, I didn't know how to tune it. My father called Jimmy and he invited me to the house late Christmas morning and helped me tune the guitar. When I went to his house, he was playing an electric guitar, and it was at that moment I was inspired. I went on to play professionally, and it started with that day in his kitchen. As a performer, he was a pioneer here. There is no doubt that he influenced everyone of my generation on Nantucket in terms of playing and performing. He was a sweet man and definitely one of the nicest, well-liked men on Nantucket." So when you're on Surfside Road and you drive by this monument, think about Jimmy. So there's some positive vibes to start off this select board meeting. Okay, we are on to announcements. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This meeting is being video and audio recorded. We're going to have some of our departments report out on the 4th of July and some of the follow-ups that they can talk about from this year's events. Chief, I guess we'll start with you.
Good evening. I think it's safe to say that our efforts are successful. Last year we had a very quiet 4th of July. This year was essentially the same way. We did have a little bit of incursion, I would call it, up at Cisco Beach, in which we made quite a few arrests for underage persons in possession of alcohol. I think all total we made 18 this year, where last year we made 7 over the day. So, our plan at this point, after talking with state police, is we will continue. They've already agreed to come back next year to continue the effort. We believe the multiple year effort needs to continue. Our ultimate goal is hopefully by the time the weekend rolls around again on the 4th of July, we can get things back to the way they used to be. We think this multiple year effort will have that impact. We had all the town departments. This year we did something a little different too, in that we put the fence up at the beaches, and the dumpsters and everything. We left them up for an extended period of time. Really, the crowds that came to the beach were biggest the weekend before and the weekend after. All in all, we had an average of about 7,000 beachgoers on the lifeguarded beaches throughout that week, and every day, and then about 6,500 on the North Shore, which is quite a few. And on the actual 4th of July, we had quite a few small groups out on Cotu that went out there by boat. One boatload of 8 underage youth was picked up by the environmental police for possession of alcohol. But other than that, everything was pretty quiet out there. So I think our efforts are successful, and urge the board to continue to support us in trying to make this the norm. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, the fire chief was, he may be in, he had to attend the Wisconsin Civic Association annual meeting, so he may or may not make his way in, but as I understand it, he let me know that things seem to go pretty well from the fire end. Culture and tourism?
Good evening, Janet Schulte, Culture and Tourism. I'm glad it was quiet where it was supposed to be, because it was loud and fun where it was also supposed to be. The Main Street activities were well received. We had hundreds, maybe thousands of people on Main Street. We've had some new volunteers running our watermelon this year, watermelon contest, or watermelon eating contest, and the mat fee ring toss. So we're always happy that the volunteers step up to provide this event, because that's how it all happens. The fire department showed up, and so did the Boynton Lane Reserves, and that was a great battle between the two. I'm sorry to tell you it was inconclusive, so we're going to have to do it again next year. And the DPW was great. They came before and helped with all the setup, and they were there afterwards for all the cleanup. And I have to say, our efforts to reduce water balloons between my office and town administration, I think we saw a 75% reduction in water balloons on Main Street this year. So we need to keep that up, because our goal is 100% reduction in water balloons. But we were giving out lanyards and buttons, and every time I handed one out to people, I said, you need to shout no water balloons if you see any. And people heard those shouts of no water balloons when it happens. So great. And I want to give a big nod to David Sharp, because he really pulls the whole events together, recruits the volunteers, makes sure that everything happens and coordinates the whole thing, and he did a fabulous job. On that afternoon, we had 100 kids at Children's Beach for the traditional games, the three-legged race, the tug of war, that kind of stuff. We also had a concert, and Bobby Lamb was there making balloon animals or creations for children. The fireworks on Thursday night, we consulted among 3 or 4 of us, the harbor master, the fire chief, the police chief, and myself, and determined that Thursday night was the better night than Friday night, given the weather forecast. And it was a little bit of a cotton candy, impressionistic interpretation of the fireworks, but everybody that I was sitting next to on the beach at Jetty's Beach seemed to have a good time, and there was a huge round of applause when it was done. So I think it was a great 4th of July, and for my first one, I thought we did a pretty good job.
Thank you, Janet. You guys did a great job. Public Works? Well, while you're up there, Rob's going to also give us a little brief update about the landfill entrance reconfiguration.
Sure. Thank you. So Public Works supported festivities downtown, as well as at the beach and solid waste island-wide, as well as with the second ceremonial flag raising at the Wisconsin flagpole. Despite having our trash compactor truck down, the guys were able to keep up with all the trash island-wide, and no special situations. The temporary locations on Nobody Beach are working out really well, as the chief mentioned. So, switching over to the new traffic configuration at the landfill. The lines were added last night. Some signs were supplemented this morning, and will continue to unfold in the coming weeks. But as you can imagine, the first day of operation was a complete chaos. There was lots of people that fell into line, but majority of everybody that have been trained to do things the same way for as long as they've been doing it, it's going to take a while to get into that rhythm and to do something completely opposite. That said, I did spend some time, and various staff members spent some time over there evaluating, and we came up with a few different short-term help to both get feedback and also provide some additional signage and barriers to direct people in the right way. We've also scheduled a couple police details for this coming weekend to, again, make sure people are on the right track and traveling through the site safely. And I think with the increased traffic for Saturday and Sunday that's anticipated, it will really help force people into the various lanes and configuration and traffic patterns that we've put into place. So far, so good. We're getting a lot of really good, constructive, and positive feedback.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I wanted to quickly also, there's a couple more announcements, but I want to introduce our new Chief Technology Officer, Karen McGonigal. You don't have to say anything, Karen, but she's over there. Thank you. She has come over to us from the school department where she was Chief Technology Officer there. So we're very glad to welcome her. We have our second Coastal Resiliency Workshop scheduled for next Wednesday, July 18th, at 6 p.m. here in this room. It'll be very much similar to the setup of the first one, which was in May, and we're hoping for a good turnout there. We've been doing some public outreach on that. We also have a Great Ponds Forum that will be held here in this room again on Monday, July 23rd, starting at 5 p.m. We'd like to review with interested parties our draft pond management principles. They can be found online right now, and if people have comments, questions, concerns, ideas, we'd be happy to have them come to that meeting. The next select board meeting after tonight, since we're on our summer schedule, will be Wednesday, July 25th.
Can I add a couple? NP and EDC is meeting July 16th, 6 o'clock upstairs, and we'll be discussing the South Shore 40B situation. Downstairs at 5:30, I believe it is, there'll be John Flores, candidate for Cape and Island Senate, will be here, and he'll be discussing common sense government and housing and some other issues. So if you're interested in housing and those issues, 5:30 here and 6 o'clock up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. Is there anybody here to speak that's not on the agenda?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I should have probably said this earlier. Sheila Lucy, the harbor master, just texted me and wanted me to let the public know that they're experiencing extremely dangerous surf conditions and rip tides on the South Shore. They've left lifeguards on the beach into this evening just to tell people not to go into the water. They double red flagged Surfside and Nobody Beach about 4 o'clock today. And they expect those conditions to get worse overnight and last through tomorrow into early afternoon. So they're asking people to please be very careful at the beaches. Last year, we had an unfortunate incident that occurred in August in similar conditions. So we implore on people, please listen to the lifeguards. Don't go into the water. Thank you.
I'm assuming this is coming from the hurricane that's shooting through Atlantic. Yeah. Any other public comment that's not on the agenda? Just please state your name.
My name is Christopher Gallant. Good evening, and thank you. We are here tonight to introduce ourselves to the board. My name is Christopher Gallant, and from 253 Organic. 253 Organic has applied for a manufacturing, cultivation, and retail license for a recreational marijuana facility in the town of Montague, Massachusetts. We have submitted all necessary packets for consideration by the Cannabis Control Commission. Furthermore, we have executed a host agreement with a letter of support from the town of Montague, both of which were signed on April 2nd. Currently, we are waiting for the CCC to review our application and issue us our license. 253 Organic is comprised of 4 partners, 2 of which are Nantucket residents. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Gallant, Seth Rutherford, Marsha Wagner, and Alan Shore. Seth and I are Nantucket residents. Marsha and Alan live outside of Boston. All 4 owners have run businesses and employed hundreds of people among us as excellent corporate citizens. We are here tonight to inform you that we'll be seeking a recreational marijuana permit for our location on Nantucket. We currently own property that is zoned for medical marijuana, and we presume it will also be zoned for recreational marijuana. 253 Organic is a well-funded, well-managed, and well-advised team that plans to operate a safe environment facility here on Nantucket. We're also here tonight to let the town know that they have a local option instead of a large out-of-state corporation that doesn't understand Nantucket. I have lived here and run a construction business for 15 years, and Seth has lived here for 21 years, raising his family along with running an irrigation business. We have hired Lee Olson to take us through the build-out of our facilities. Lee is an industrial engineer by education, but has been an entrepreneur for 30 years, marijuana being his latest endeavor. Lee has been immersed in the marijuana field now for 5 years and has designed cultivation, extraction, and retail sales. He currently owns 3 facilities in Colorado, totaling 43,000 square feet of cultivation and extraction facility, also 2 retail locations. Lee has designed and overseen construction of an 11,000 square foot cultivation facility in Arizona and a 28,000 square foot cultivation facility and 3,000 square foot facility in Adelaide, California. Lee has worked closely with local government, regulators, building and planning departments in Colorado, Arizona, and California. We're very excited to have Lee on our team with his wealth of knowledge and experience in such a new, secretive industry. From all of us at 253 Organic, we would like to look forward to partnering with the town of Nantucket. We intend to follow up this introduction to the town with a letter to the select board to start the host agreement process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment here tonight? That's not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none. There's no new business that I know about. Do all 3 of these together. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, the payroll warrants, and treasury warrants?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You. And we have pending contracts. Let me make a couple comments.
I did, yes.
Okay. Before we,
There's just some things to bring to your attention here.
okay.
There are several contracts on here for the Plus Department. They are all in connection with peer reviews for the Surfside Crossing 40B. These were referenced, I believe, at your last meeting, but the contracts are now on the agenda, so I just wanted to mention that. There's also a contract on the agenda in connection with that same project for a traffic study. It's the last item there, Beta Group, and at the time we were putting this together, we didn't know the amount, but it's now approximately $28,000. So that is going to get underway as well. And I also just wanted to mention that the Mass DOT contract that's just above the Beta Group contract for DPW annual milestone road maintenance, DPW director was able to get the state to agree to increase our annual maintenance allocation from the state to the town to maintain that road from $40,000 a year, from $35,000 a year to $75,000 a year. So thank you, Rob, for that. And I think I just wanted to mention those things, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any comments?
Just a comment. In regards to the Beta Group contract, I was the sole dissenting vote on the MPDC for that contract, not because I didn't think some of the counts were important at that time of the summer. They are, but I think that we need to do more extensive modeling to understand the impacts at Five Corners and other areas where if we move everyone quicker at these roundabouts, what is it going to be like elsewhere? So I just feel very strongly, and I hope, when we talk about this later, maybe this group will consider doing that sort of modeling or putting the money up, because we would be wasting our money if we don't, if we're going to be making it worse everywhere else. And this was possible 25 years ago. It should be possible to do now. So anyway.
Just the 14,000 does not, for Haley and Ward, that does not include any incremental funds that we talked about at our last meeting about additional consulting the board may want to engage a firm with.
That does not,
Okay.
but that item is further on in your agenda.
I understand. I just want to make sure that, okay.
Any other comments or motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes. Moving on to consent items, gift acceptance from Natural Resources Department. Any comments or motion?
Motion
Move.
to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Citizen Department request. We request for a road name change, Elliott's Way to Reed's Way. This is off of Winoma Way and Tom Nevers. Pleasure of the board.
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. Number 2, request for street name approval, White Elephant Way off of South Beach Street.
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Finance Department end-of-year budget transfers for FY 2018. Brian's going to walk us through that.
Good evening. So as you're aware, under Chapter 33B, we're able to move money between departments to fund any potential deficits that may be created. We have until July 15th to do this. We were before the Finance Committee last night, who did vote favorably for these. We're asking for the authority to move $30,000 from DPW salaries into town administration salaries. That's related to the transfer of the former assistant DPW director into the manager of strategic projects. We were asking to move $100,000 in the town administration expenses line into the capital projects related to the repair of the town pier. When we did that at town meeting and moving forward, we didn't allocate any money for any potential OPM services related to oversight of that, so we're asking for that. We had substantial savings in health insurance, and given the fact that there's a lot of requests for additional consulting work on some various projects, we're asking to move $200,000 of that into town administration, professional services for any of the additional not only 40B reviews that the board has talked about wanting to undertake that are outside the scope of what the applicant is required to pay for, some money for strategic plan implementation for the recently adopted strategic plan, and there's also money in case there's any additional reviews for Harbor Place that you would like outside of whatever's been discussed. We're asking to move from public buildings expenses $75,000. Excuse me. This is to cover the DPW expenses related to the winter storms and the emergency repairs that we needed to do on Pulpus Road. We're asking to move $15,000 from fire department salaries into their expense line related to sending new recruits to the academy. We're asking to move from police salaries into the expense line $15,000 to cover additional uniform expenses that we incurred during the year. So that's all that's in the general fund, which is actually, usually we've done this twice. I will say that all the department heads and my staff worked very hard to review POs and expenditures to try to minimize the number of transfers that we had to do. We're asking for approval for 2 in the enterprise fund. As you remember, we had a contract nursing 2 contract nursing contracts with outside staffing agencies. We're asking to move some of the savings in the salaries line into their professional services to cover some of that contract. And then in sewer, we're asking to move $35,000 from their salary from their expense line into their salary line This is mainly related to the overtime incurred during the force main emergency. If we actually do get any insurance reimbursements, some of this would be allocated back in and then flow to retained earnings. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I just had one, and I know we all participated in working with some consultants as they're looking at the structure of compensation and jobs and job evaluations. That's really a pretty elemental base to create a baseline. And I would expect that based on the recommendations, town administration may want to consider implementing some other or involving them with some other consulting arrangements. Is there any money in that transfer to do that?
It would be my expectation that we may be able to cover it through the 200,000.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, the board?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, next on the list, Nantucket Booster Club request for waiver of town noise bylaw from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. for a walk-in movie night to be held at the high school football field.
I make a motion to approve the request.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously.
And they're playing Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It looks really fun.
Has anybody here not seen that movie? Still be really good to see it at the football field. It's a good one. Okay, well, on to public hearings. We're going to open up the public hearing to consider a rate increase for private pay residents at our island home. Daily private pay rate, semi-private room rate from $440 to $500 per day. Daily private pay rate in private room from $460 to $520 per day.
Mr. Chairman, just want to remind the board that at your meeting on June 6th, this item came up. The Island Home Administrator reviewed it with you, and it was that time we agreed to have this public hearing. So you've heard the rationale behind it. I'm sure that Brett could review it with you again, but this was sort of formalizing what he talked
Yeah, I
about.
don't have any questions.
If this is a public hearing, is there anyone from the public like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing.
Motion to approve the
Second.
increase.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Open a public hearing to consider application for amended bulk fuel storage license for Nantucket Energy for installation of 3 additional 30,000-gallon LP gas underground tanks, in addition to previously approved 120,000 gallons of LP gas to be located at 25 Bunker Road. It's a public hearing. Phil?
Yeah, I just want to say we're trying to just increase storage. We had a lot of problems this winter with the ice and everything, and then the subsequent not being able to get any additional boats or hazardous materials. And we actually ran out of gas a couple times. We're able to mitigate that by, short filling and things like that. Just puts a lot more stress on our whole system. And with the moving of all the bulk storage out to the airport now, and all the fuel will come on the boat, no longer being able to be brought in here by barge, it's going to put more and more stress on the boat. So we opted to invest some money to install more storage to try to mitigate that problem from occurring again. So.
Just want to note that the fire chief has several conditions that we would recommend that you incorporate if you approve this.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public like to speak on this? This is a public hearing. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. It's the pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve with the conditions proposed by the fire chief included.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes unanimously. Town managers report. Over to you, Libby.
Okay, the first item is reviewing warrant articles for the October 10th, 2018 special town meeting. There's a little bit of a list in your packet of these items. We've been talking about marijuana bylaws for some time now, zoning and general bylaws. There's some information in your packet from town council, actually some draft articles in your packet. Is Andrew here yet? Okay. The planning board, as I understand it, was discussing this at their meeting on Monday night, and there may be some recommendations coming out of that. I'm just not sure what they did, so we need him to let us know that. And in the meantime, town council is here, an attorney from town council's office, to review the articles that have been drafted for your review. And Katie could maybe explain the general bylaw item. And the bigger issue might be the number of establishments and whether or not the board would like to have any particular article on that. And that there's a memo in your packet about that as well.
Okay.
And I don't, depending on what you do, there may or may not be a ballot vote required.
So for time frame purposes, we have, like to get as much direction as we can tonight. We would approve this on the 25th. Just to give you a sense of, we only have one more meeting after this. So if we, for example, needed more information, we would only have one more meeting to take care of it before August 4th, before August 8th.
But we could approve it tonight.
Could approve it tonight.
Okay, good. That's an
Just
option.
trying to give us
Great.
some framework.
Okay, good.
On any of them, any of the bylaws. Would you like to, any questions for Katie? Would anybody like to start with a motion? Do we want to discuss it?
Do we have a confirmation as to exactly what 20% is? Is it 2?
Katie has said to us before that if we were to, for example, put a general bylaw in that limited to 2, we would not need to go to a ballot because we have 8 year-round liquor stores, correct? And so 20%, that's 1.6. So 2 would not need a ballot. Is that correct? Am I getting ahead? Am I not worded that correctly?
So the bylaw that I proposed would be a limit to 20% to cap it at a percentage with the number being rounded up. If you are below 20%, then that's what requires a ballot.
Okay.
But 20% would be 1.6. We would round up to 2. 2 is above 20%, so that would not require the ballot.
Okay.
Well, while we're on this,
Yep.
there's one I hadn't really, maybe I just hadn't paid attention. Limit the number of adult use marijuana to fewer than the number of medical marijuana treatment centers registered to engage in the same type of activity. Basically, a sliding scale. You can't have one adult use until you have at least 2 medical. Have we heard that before? I just thought that was, I'd like to have an explanation of that one. I hadn't heard that.
So under the marijuana law, there are 2 different types of limitations that require a ballot vote. The one that we've talked about the most is when you link it to the percentage of your off-premises liquor licenses. The other type of limitation that would require a vote is if you wanted to impose a limitation that put fewer than the number of medical marijuana establishments registered to engage in the same type of activity, which we haven't really discussed. But again, it's a limitation that if you go below that threshold, that's when you would require the ballot vote to take
Okay.
place.
So if we had 3 medical licenses here, we wanted to limit it to 1, then it has to go to a ballot. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But if we had 2 medical, we could have 1 retail. Is that, am I reading
And
this?
again, this is a bylaw that you would put in place that basically establishes a threshold number. So it's if you're looking to impose a bylaw limitation of the type that links medical and recreational.
So we would be say we'd be capping the medical at 2 or 3 or some number, and then they would be tied to that, the retail. Or is that how it, like, what's, or can it be all different manners? Like, what's the?
Well, I mean, it would depend on how you wanted to structure the bylaw. I mean, the language basically says fewer than the number of establishments registered to engage in the same type of activity. I'll be honest, this has not been a very common bylaw limitation that has been imposed, and I have not seen a lot of communities look to put this type of limitation in their zoning, again, because it's the type of thing that requires that you go to the ballot. But yeah, I mean, you could enact a bylaw that basically mirrors the language
That's written here.
of what is in the act, but again, with a ballot vote to approve.
So this bylaw would not need a ballot vote, as stated here, or would?
If you limited it to 20%,
Yep.
or you chose a number that was above 20%,
Yep.
then you would not require a ballot
Okay.
in order to impose that type of limitation.
So if we have this limitation in the bylaws, how many outlets for marijuana sales will there be on Nantucket, including recreational, medical, or any other category?
So this limitation is specific to adult use recreational. There has been no proposal to limit the number of medical. The way that medical has been limited up to this point in time under the existing regulatory structure is through the issuance of a letter of support or non-opposition, which is something that the board has the discretion to do. There's not the same discretionary authority to impose that type of limitation on the adult use side. So if we want to have a limitation imposed by bylaw, the procedure is to enact the bylaw. If it falls below a certain threshold, then you also have to have the supporting ballot in order to enact it.
So we'd have no limit on medicals, strictly medical, correct?
No zoning bylaw limit
Okay. All right. That's what. All right.
or general bylaw limit.
Okay. And it's our, assumption that medical will be converting to recreational. Is that your experience in other parts of the state?
Not necessarily. I
Okay.
mean, I think a year or two ago when medical was the only game in town, some people got into the medical market with an eye towards
Right.
the adult use recreational. But there are certainly applicants that are looking to just do medical or just do adult use.
But
And
we've heard, I think, from the medicals that they intend to go to request for recreational. Is that a true statement?
the establishments that have looked to do business in Nantucket
Yes.
specifically, the Green Lady is one applicant who started on the medical side and is now pursuing adult use recreational. There's not necessarily an assumption in the regulatory structure of the state licensing that a medical applicant is going to convert to recreational. Certainly, some establishments have looked to co-locate medical and adult use in the same structure, which is an option that is allowed under the regulations. So it really depends on the business and what their operating plan is.
Okay, I have a hypothetical for you. Let's say we limit it to 1 or 2, and after a year we think, oh my gosh, we want to have 5. What are the steps to do? The same bylaw change at an annual town meeting, special town meeting? How would that work?
Right. So let's take the 2 number because that's the one that didn't require the ballot.
Right.
So if you impose a bylaw limitation, there shall be no more than 2 establishments, and we pick a number. And a year from now, you want to change that, then it's a bylaw amendment to increase the number. There shall be no more than 5. Or if it's a percentage base, we could increase the percentage. So if it's enacted by a bylaw, then to raise that cap would be a further bylaw amendment.
Is that a 2/3 vote or just a straight up majority, 50?
The limitation that I've proposed this evening is through a general bylaw, so that would just be a majority vote.
Okay. And to change it would also be 50 the following
That's
year.
exactly right.
Okay. Just trying to think through it before we.
Yeah.
I'm also wondering if we were to limit it to 2, at what point, say, do we have an open and close date for applications and then 5 are submitted and then we choose 2? Or I'm thinking a little bit of what's going on with mass media and the not having any sort of sunset clause on that approval that we gave them. How do we, when there's only 2, how do we decide who gets what and when?
So that's an interesting question. And in some communities that have imposed a limitation like the type we're discussing tonight, I've seen either the select board or a working group or subcommittee come together and put together, for example, an informal sort of request for qualifications, basically a summary of what you would be looking for in the types of establishments. And if you have 5 or 8 or 10 applicants, then you kind of review all of those and determine who the 2 licenses go to. Some other communities have sort of been doing first in time, depending on the interest that's been expressed. But you really, as the entity that issues the host community agreements, you're going to control who gets those initial 2 licenses.
So we could say, like, pick a date in the fall to take in proposals for the 2. Sometime after
If a limitation
sometime after the
is
town
what we
meeting.
decide to put in place.
If we propose a limitation, because I was concerned about the same thing.
Well, except that they've already been, one's is agreed upon and approved, and the other one is, they both have been agreed upon and approved, so they'd be in.
The medical.
Well, for medical, but they're grandfathered, so mass media is grandfathered and can become recreational, correct?
Not without a
They can,
location.
but we still need a host community agreement, which we have control over, right?
And I think they also have to operate as medical at the moment. Is that correct? That's the whole conversion issue where you have to be operating as medical to convert.
Yeah, so the situation with Mass Medi Spa currently is that they received a provisional certificate of registration prior to July 1st of 2017. What that requires under the state law is that any zoning that the town puts in place cannot act to prevent them from converting from medical to an adult use establishment. We have had some discussions about where their application currently is, and I know that as of right now, they do not have a location that's been approved by the board, and they would have to come back to the board for a new letter of support or non-opposition for even just their medical. So I think there is some open question as to what their current status is with respect to the adult use conversion.
You think your concern is valid, Matt? Like, so we limit it to 2, for example.
And we've got
Go
2.
with 2, and then now all of a sudden we have a third because state law superseded us.
Right. Well, I just know in a situation like this in business, what you would do is you would say, I'm sorry, this is no longer valid. When Dr. Pepper Snapple owned Matt Fee, I sent them a letter, say, stop doing it. Thank you very much. They never hear back, but they stopped doing it. And, I'm wondering why we just don't send a letter to say, stop doing it, please reapply. Thank you very much. You haven't found a place over a certain amount of time. Please reapply, and we'll consider your application at that time. I don't want to be in a situation. I feel as though it was a bit of a bait and switch. We were told we had no choice. We had to accept them. We had to have medical. So we said, okay, we won't oppose it because we can't oppose it. And then and then a new board is in, and a year and a half goes along, and then all of a sudden they've got recreational in here before we even voted on it. And I think we're going to end up voting for some recreational, but I hope it's not let it rip in the Wild West. I think we should go slowly. And so anyway, I feel pretty strongly that if there's a way to strengthen our position, sending a letter and asking them to reapply, I would like whatever we can do to strengthen our position in that regard, I would ask that we do it.
We've had several discussions about this,
I know.
and my understanding is that we don't really need to ask them to do anything. It's when they have a location, they can come in and we can review it again and the board can determine whether or not it wants to even enter into a host community agreement.
Or a letter of non-opposition.
Sorry,
Before
letter of
that.
non-opposition.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct. I
Is there a way to strengthen that position?
I don't think that the fact that their provisional certificate was issued in July, before July 1st of 2017, I mean, it was back in 2014, there have been a number of changes in the circumstances with respect to that applicant. I think the select board still has the authority to look at each of the adult use retail applicants as they come in on their merits and determine who gets that license or who gets that agreement.
Okay.
Because I would argue we didn't look at that on their merits. We looked at it and said we have no choice anyway, so we have to do this. And then it sort of changed. So the previous board that gave a non-opposition wasn't really looking at merits much. So anyway.
That letter was with respect to a different location, and any change of location is going to require a new letter.
Right.
Are we creating any kind of a new market for these licenses once we give them out?
Yes.
If we're limiting them now, have we created like the Boston liquor licenses where they're worth a lot of money because there's none available? Can we make it so that they can't be sold?
There is the ability under state law for changes of ownership with respect to these establishments. That's not something that's the subject of local control. Now, if there's language that we have proposed in some of these host community agreements that talks about assigning the rights under these agreements to new owners and entities. And certainly the special permits can be made specific to a particular applicant. So I think there is some ability on the local level to control your review of who is operating each of these licenses. The other general bylaw that has been proposed as part of your packet this evening is a local licensing bylaw, which would give the select board the authority to issue annual licenses to these establishments and basically monitor what's going on and who's operating the licenses.
I think that's another important question because we're giving these licenses out on the merit of who's presenting them and to build that relationship. And if that changed, we had no control over that, I think we would want to find a way to have some type of control. Do you think that second bylaw you just mentioned gives us that?
The local
The local
licensing, certainly if the license is made specific to a particular applicant and then there is a change in who is the controlling owner of that entity, that is something that could require new licensing or modification of a license.
Like with establishments that serve liquor, they have to come to us for a change of manager.
Yeah, but I think you have to think, it's written into the host agreement in the document, we all read it. But you have to realize when you get to that point, we'd be hard pressed to deny because there's, businesses and entities have rights and you'd end up in court. And, I think it would be, we can't just sit, it's wishful thinking to think that we're going to be able to control who has these because there's a lot of protections under commerce law and other law that I think we would run foul of. Am I right?
And the other point that I would just make is that there's a highly regulated state, this is highly regulated on the state level with respect to who can qualify for the licenses and the kind of types of background checks, the training and the management of each of these establishments. And so this is being highly regulated on the state level, which could perhaps help alleviate some concerns about sort of who's coming in and taking over these licenses because they will have to meet a very high bar in order to be able to be approved on the state level to operate.
But by the very nature of limiting the number of licenses, we're increasing the value of them. So, but the alternative is, well, let's have 100. So we don't want to do that. So I mean, I think that's just nature of business.
I think the local worry that I've heard is that it will just go to big corporation, and it won't be.
That's actually another
local.
question I had was the CCC has put in quite a few things that will help give local preference. Is that the kind of thing if those licenses were sold, say locals, Massachusetts residents had them, they sell them, or is there anything to prevent them then selling them to bigger corporations that are not Massachusetts?
Well, the local preference that you're talking about in the state regulation has to do not so much with the retail side necessarily, but more with the craft marijuana cultivation cooperative. But then there are these micro business licenses also, which are intended to promote sort of small business, small operators, and provide a lower bar. And again, those are open to anyone who's been a Massachusetts resident for at least 12 months. But again, those are not retail licenses. Those are cultivation and processing.
And is there any way to have some sort of local preference within our bylaws or no for retail?
I think that's certainly something that could be part of a request for a qualification to sort of look at promotion of local entrepreneurs.
Would it be something similar to what the CCC has done and have some sort of Massachusetts residency requirement?
The Nantucket residency requirement?
Not Nantucket, but even Massachusetts. I mean, big companies can come from Massachusetts, but keeping it as local as possible. I don't know about Nantucket residency, but just trying to see if there's a way to strengthen the local preference as much as possible.
I think if we have a limitation imposed on the number of licenses, and it's up to the board to determine based on the number of applicants available, what your preference is going to be, as long as you have some criteria and it's not arbitrary, and it's applied equally across the applicant base, then I think you have a strong basis for determining who's going to get those host community agreements.
How's the board feeling when to make a motion?
I mean, I think the appropriate direction for town meeting is to propose a limitation. And we'll let the voters decide at town meeting.
And I'm comfortable with the limitation as outlined in the proposed bylaw.
The 20% of liquor licenses.
Which would be 2.
Yeah. For the moment, yeah.
So for, just to kind of get the boards, kind of see where everybody is, I'd make a motion that we recommend a town meeting. Article 3, limitations on number of marijuana establishments, limitation on licenses as outlined in that Article 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
For discussion? Second. So if 5 more year-round liquor store, package stores open up tomorrow, which I don't think is happening anytime soon, Amy. But if that happened, right, then that number could go up, right? If we keep it to the percentage.
Yeah, if we set it at a percentage and then there's an increase, then, but I mean, you would have to get a fairly significant increase for that to bring it up to a whole nother establishment.
Okay.
And we've been very cautious and guarded about doing that. And we've just recently went through a process that was validated where we turned back a year-round liquor store license.
Yeah.
Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay. All those for? Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Well, I was just going to ask, I think it's probably the next one, looking at limitations on any of the other, that's subsequent votes. We're just talking about the first.
Or the adult use marijuana retailers.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
Yep.
retail.
Yep.
Okay. All those for?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. And is there anything else we'd like to make sure we go over?
Well, Andrew's here now, so
Okay.
I was hoping he could outline what happened with planning board and any zoning recommendations.
Okay, so basically, the planning board intends to have 3 articles. The first one is going to be adding all the new definitions. So there's a number of new definitions to add in for the bylaw. So that's section 2. The second article is going to be the use chart amendments. So this is section 7. So this is where, some of these new uses will be put in the bylaw. The intent here is to list all of the uses. There's 2 that still have pending rules and regulations, which is the delivery and the social consumption. Is that right? So we've seen from other towns that they've put that in the bylaw in anticipation of the rules eventually coming. But for now, those will be uses that are specifically not allowed in any district. And then the final article will be a new section 9 in the bylaw, which currently has no particular section language at all. And that's setting the standards for the approval of the special permit. So 3 articles. Final article, we're having a special meeting. The board is still gathering their thoughts on this. Final meeting on this will be on the 16th, and then we'll be forwarding the articles too.
Andrew, did you guys look at any changing or widening the zoning for cultivation or any other type of licenses? Do you see any need for that?
I think like your overall feeling on this, the planning board feels we should go slow on this and sort of see how it works and how it I guess rolls out here. There's a town meeting every year where this could be expanded, sometimes 2.
Most often 2.
So there's an opportunity to amend the bylaw over time as either we get comfortable with it or the rules change. We're thinking of the separate articles too in case there's specific debate on that issue. So we're focused on, discussing where the uses might be instead of wrapping it all into one.
Right. Okay. Any questions? Comments for Andrew?
Those were the kind of things that I was anticipating and looking for. So So with those and with what we voted for, I think that I feel good about it.
We spent a lot of time, a lot of thought, and done a lot of research, and I think we're at a good place.
Thanks. One thing just to add on your earlier discussion about the two establishments that have not received a special, they do not have special permits from the planning board. They have not received site approval from the planning board, and basically, in consultation with town administration and with Katie here, we've let them know that until they get their host agreement and there are other things worked out with you, that we're not in a position to issue those permits.
Okay.
Thank you.
Was the board okay with the other two articles that were drafted, the general bylaw and the licensing? You talked about the
Yes.
third one, the limitation, but were those, maybe those were kind of a given?
Would you like a motion?
A
just
motion?
To push those through?
Probably be
As well.
helpful, I guess. We can
Yeah.
finish them off.
So I'd make a motion that we also recommend the other articles as outlined in our attachment in the packet.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes.
Okay, so we'll be getting these additional articles from the planning board for your meeting on the 25th. And you can have, there may be more discussion at that time. Other articles, the other main two articles are Old South Road corridor improvements and Milestone Road corridor improvements, I guess I would call them. And there's a chart that you've seen before in your packet. That's the information that we have right now. Finance director has had the articles prepared using the standard language for an appropriation article contingent upon a debt exclusion. And these two specifically would go to a ballot. So now that I think we've established that the marijuana article does not need a ballot, the ideal place for the debt exclusions to go would be the November ballot. In order to get something on the November ballot, the Secretary of State's office has to be notified by August 1st. So that will mean that your warrant will have to be approved at your meeting on the 25th. The rest of these articles are pretty straightforward, so I don't really see too many issues there, but that's just an FYI. And have those been reviewed by bond counsel, Brian? Yeah, or they? Okay. So they're sort of still being finalized, but I don't think there's going to be any surprise to you. I don't know if you want any more information about those.
Nope, it's good.
So, do you need a motion from us or any direction on these two? Or do we want to approve it all on the 25th?
Well, why don't we?
Might as well do it now. So and also recommend, what are we recommending here?
I guess you're recommending appropriation articles for those two capital projects.
So I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we've talked earlier about the importance of community outreach and public outreach, and I know the town administration is working on that.
The only thing I've had some discussions on and still is a little confusing is the state involvement in Milestone Road. There's opportunity to get some of that paid for by the state, either down the road or we have to pay for it and build it first. I don't really know. Is it a gamble? Is it I don't really know that if it's political, if it's how much the state has in their coffers to give to us.
Maybe Mike can answer that. It sounds like something of a gamble.
Right. Even if there's some chance, that would just be good to explain to voters.
No, I've met recently, and we try to do some coordination with the Mass DOT and District 5, their project development staff at the district level. The district has requested that the town, and I can prepare the paperwork to initiate two projects related to Milestone Road. One is not necessarily related to this, but the one that is the Milestone Rotary. We're told to initiate that project by this fall for review by their capital program committee. Once that's approved, and it is supported by the district, once that's approved, the district will be funding the design and will program the construction of the Milestone Rotary at a future year of the TIP. So that'll be a federal and state funded project, design and construction. Not quite sure which fiscal year construction will be programmed in, but it's speculated that 22, 23 could be a likely fiscal year.
So is this in addition to the normal 400,000 we get from the tip, or is this will just be taken away from that, and take away from another project? Does that make sense? Is it in addition?
Since it's a state highway, there is a separate account
Okay.
for maintenance of state highways and improvements of state highways. So that will be the funding source for that. There is a regional target that we use for other bike path intersection projects throughout the island that aren't on the state highway. And that is subject to the regional target unless it's, some discretionary funds are applied. If you'd like me to mention the other project that's not necessarily tied to this, the widening of Milestone Road, at least adding a 1 foot shoulder, at least a 1 foot shoulder to either side of that project. The first phase between the Milestone Rotary and Bunker Road and South Road. That's something that they'd like to advance as well, based on comments that were received through a road safety audit that was done with town staff, and comments that were received during the recent Milestone Safety Improvement public hearing that was held earlier this year. So that's going to be another project that's going to be advanced by the district using state aid. Not related to this, but just as an FYI.
So, Mike, by the time the voters go to the ballot for this debt exclusion, will we know anything more, or is it it is what it is right now?
There are what's considered lower priority intersections, the roundabout at Pulpus Road and the roundabout at Nobodere Farm Road. Those being considered lower priority, that they would be reconsidered in a future year, not necessarily this particular year. Like I said, the only one that was considered priority and willingness to advance is the reconstruction of the Milestone Rotary design and construction.
Okay, I guess I'll ask it a different way. If
Sure.
the Milestone Rotary, if it's $4 million of the $7 million for Milestone Rotary, by November will we know that $2 million of that will be funded by the state? Even though we might have to come up with the money first. Will we know anything like that, more concrete?
Yeah, what we'd like to do is get the authorization here locally. 100% of the design and construction will be through the state, not locally. So although you would get it, if you're going to advance this and it does pass the ballot and the town meeting, the authorization for, say, $8 million, just a round figure, $8 million for milestone improvements, not all of that $8 million would actually be obligated at a future date. A significant portion of that would be through the Milestone Rotary and using state and federal funds. So no obligation of the local funding at all.
Did your question get answered?
I think so.
So we would get the
Yes.
authorization, but we wouldn't necessarily need to borrow them
No, there's no need to.
anywhere near the amount of money that we're asking for.
Exactly.
But will we know that by the ballot is what the question. The answer is yes or no?
No.
Okay. So
Like I
the
said,
answer
we're
is no.
advancing the project in this fall. And, I can tell you that, yes, the Milestone Rotary, look at that project. Right now, it's $2.8, $3 million. That would not be obligated. It would be authorized, but not acted on.
Right. I just think it's important to get out to the voters that they know that that's going to be funded by the state.
Correct. And that was kind of communicated through the capital process for this in the spring, that we'd like to see ideally something like 30% of that $14 million at the time funded through state and federal grants. We just can't program the project at that time. And by November, it won't be programmed into the TIP, but we do have commitments from the state that to submit and advance the project, and that they will be taking on design and construction. It'll be programmed at a later date. It just won't be in November.
Okay. It's kind of good then.
I think we need to be able to communicate pretty concisely and clearly to the public when we talk about this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, while you're up there, Mike, I wanted to ask my favorite topic, modeling. What would it require for us to model? I just, I've heard people didn't vote for it because then why are we moving people quicker just to pile them up on Washington Street and at Five Corners? And so, we've looked at just this single corridor and we're quote unquote fixing a couple areas in this corridor and they're going to flow freer and everything else. What are they going to do to the other areas? What do we put together to get that answer prior to town meeting? What does this board, if it feels strongly, have to do?
It has been modeled in the past, this scenario of fixing Milestone Rotary, modeling that. It has been done about 10 years ago. We're just now trying at the implementation stage of a lot of these recommendations that were studied and modeled 10 years ago. We can resurrect that. I think I was talking to you in the past. I think you'd like to see some kind of animation shown and that's just not something we'd be willing to present publicly. It's a tool that's used in-house, and just the precision of that and the accuracy of it is just not something you want to communicate out publicly. But they do have level of service numbers, and that is the outputs of all that modeling, just not the animation.
Why was it okay to publicly show it 20 years ago, and it predicted the situation we're in now almost exactly and more quickly, and it's not okay to show it now?
I wasn't here at the time that was being displayed. I couldn't answer that.
All right. I think it's a important tool. It was for me at least, I'm kind of the old dog who's been around long enough now. For me at least, it really showed the problems we were going to have on Old South Road, in Milestone, in Nobodere, in Surfside. And when we showed it to everybody, this is during the comp plan, all we heard was, this will never happen. We'll never have that many cars. Nothing to see here, Matt. You're being, this is unrealistic.
Yeah.
We are exactly at that, if not worse now. And I would love to make sure that we aren't going to, not show that, not do that, and then find out that, oh, geez, we've got 5 corners now, and we have Caton Circle and we have Washington Street, because what one of the consultants back then told me, and I had to push him, and I said, what happens in communities that use traditional traffic measures to, quote unquote, fix things? He said, eventually you close a road downtown. It makes everything busier. Then you close, another road. Eventually you have to take one road in and out. Let's just for argument's sake say, it's South Water or, Washington Street. Washington Street becomes a road that only buses and taxis can use in and out, or trucks. It's a truck route. So you all of a sudden you limit it, and all the rest of the roads get worse, and you close more roads. They said that's the traditional answer to these issues, which is, which led to my article for car limitations, and which led to sort of, we wanting to make this place a bike first community rather than a car first community. But that hasn't necessarily translated. So I think there's some people that feel like I feel that would like to see what's going to happen at these other intersections and make sure we aren't making the rest of the island worse.
I hear you, and I'm happy to share with you in my office. If you want to come by, I can show you the simulation program and the animation. You can see why I would probably be hesitant to show that publicly. If it freezes or locks up, you'll say, well, here we go. There's the reason why what's going to happen. But in reality, that's not really the case. I mean, things do clear out. There's times where it gets really congested and it clears out, half hour later. To show something like that and have a software just freeze up in a public presentation, I think it would be, number one, it'd be embarrassing. Number two, it just wouldn't be very accurate.
Yeah, I'm hard to embarrass.
So I guess maybe I'm overplaying it, but I get concerned when town staff says, well, we have this information, but we don't want to share it publicly. And I'm sure I didn't hear you say that. But did you say that?
It's a feature of the software. The animation is an accessory to the modeling tool itself. The models will give you a number, a level of service, a figure. We're all familiar with the A, B, C, and F level of services and delays. It'll crank out those numbers for you. To see those little chiclets move around and you'd see it in reality. There are limitations to that. It's not 100% precise. You do have to simulate the thing 15 times in order to get what we call something that's somewhat precise and accurate.
So if I asked you to bring through the chair to bring that and show it on a screen, you would refuse to do that? Is what I'm hearing you say that?
I would say, please don't make me do that, but I could do it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that'd be interesting to see.
Any other questions for Mike? Comments?
I'll email you and come and look at it, and then I'll try to convince you.
Yeah.
Well, we could vote and ask him to do it. So
if it's good, Matt, come back and say you have to do it. Thank you, Mike.
The other articles that are on the list we have reviewed with you before. There's design and engineering appropriation for a new sewer force main from C Street to Surfside Wastewater Treatment Facility. There's a couple of airport projects, and there are some potential fiscal 19 budget amendments, and we're working on all of those now. So we'll have a draft warrant for you for your next meeting. And there was, as you know, one citizen warrant article submitted, and that was in your packet.
I just want to comment that it's a big ask, but I do like that article. As a thought, at least, particularly as we're talking about landfill and what happens in 2025 and how we're dealing with our waste, thinking along those lines is a good start.
Could you tell what the
Article
there's
is,
people
yeah.
on the radio? who
So
listen.
that's right. So the article, the citizen article that was submitted is putting a limitation on single-use plastics. And it's fairly specific. My question is it legally binding, or how, if this were to pass?
We haven't even had legal review of it yet.
Okay. So, but I just want to mention that, and people can read through it. And it's not totally out of the realm of reason. It's fairly specific, but it would be challenging.
Did you say Concord? Concord is doing something very similar?
Concord has a plastic water bottle ban.
Yeah, they limited single-use plastic water bottles like I think about 4 years ago. This has been floated a number of times by different people to me, and I'm glad that it's coming up now when it's a lighter town meeting in terms of volume of articles.
Hey, we did
really
straws.
valid
We did straws.
discussion.
Let's do. So
Well, and it's sort of
the
grabbing
straws are a
things really-
voluntary
They are.
campaign.
Well, I mean, I think that there's moral suasion. So.
The straws have been illegal since like 1993.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like that's the funny thing is this stuff was banned by the town, like a long time ago, and so anyway, and I think it's good. I think the article is good. The intent is good. I think that what's interesting is the unintended consequences sometimes of these things, and I think it has to be looked at with the dump. I mean, like, so everyone on the island is turned to biodegradable plastic. Well, all it is plastic that breaks, it doesn't really biodegrade that quickly. The digester doesn't take care of it. So we've got a bunch of different plastic. You can't mix the two and do anything with it. I think our solution at some point is figuring out how to burn everything and get energy out of it so it isn't going anywhere, But I brought a prop. Don, before you go, I brought a prop. And I saw this in Hyannis the other day. And so this is banning, what we're going to ban is single use. Well, look at this. This is a reusable bag. And I look at it and I go, oh, it's not single use. And it just seems like people are finding ways around this. This is the kind of bag that we don't allow here and a lot of communities don't allow. So they just made it thicker and called it a reusable bag. And they give it out. So, so we have to be very careful. And this is in Hyannis. Here's a reusable bag, like the plastic ones they sell you for $1 at these different places. Those are just as bad or worse than the ones that we banned. And they're heavier. They take more energy to deliver. They take more space in the trucks. They burn way more oil in production. So there's all these other factors that we have to consider and people have to think about. And I think that this is a great idea, but we have to look at it in context with the dump itself and all the things. What are we really going to do there? We have banned things here, except we can't ban them at the Stop and Shop. We can't ban them from coming off island. We can only impact the on-island businesses. We can't impact the stuff that's brought. It was what we were told back then. So it's very interesting. Like, I think there's a lot more nuance to it, which is probably why we haven't enforced it that stringently, because there's more to it than we know. So.
Yeah. And I do think the article sort of grabs things we've already discussed as well as things that we haven't discussed. And I think, again, in the context, we'll have to look at it in the context of our landfill. But I think timing is everything. And the opportunity for substitution for some of this is much better than it was 20 years ago. So I think we're closer. Anyways, I like it. And I wanted to point it out.
Thank you.
People can read through it.
Worst case scenario, it spurs great dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? Worst case.
Okay, next item is review of a draft host community agreement for Green Lady Dispensary. So just little quick background. Green Lady is already a medical marijuana dispensary, licensed, permitted, all of that through the town with a host agreement. They've requested to start the process and have gone through almost all the process of getting licensed for recreational sales. We've consulted with town council quite a bit on this, and our understanding is that the general process now, although we have a moratorium in place, this would be ready to go pretty much once the moratorium is addressed. And if it's not addressed, then it wouldn't happen, or if it remained in place. I guess it wouldn't because we'd have to have a vote on that. In any case, the idea here is that we draft the host community agreement, review it internally. The chair, myself, and town council reviewed what terms we felt were appropriate. We've sent the document to Green Lady for their review, and I think we feel as though we have pretty much reached the point where we feel comfortable with the major principles in the term sheet. I do want to point out, though, to the board, there is a modified term sheet that was put in front of you tonight. We want to take you through that. It did come in late. That's unfortunate, but I don't think there's anything that you will be shocked or amazed at in the revisions. So the idea would be that we review the term sheet with you tonight. Green Lady may want to say something. And you would either generally approve this in principle tonight, and then we would finalize the document between town council, myself, and Green Lady at a later time. Or you can let us know what other additional terms you'd want to see, or modified terms, or removed terms, or whatever. So I think we're going to have Katie take us through the term sheet and point out the modifications that have been made since it was in your packet, and what happened, how they came about.
So I just want to ask one basic question. If we say we approve this tonight, that's pretty much handing them the license, correct? That's the last step for us at the board level.
So if you approve the host community agreement, that opens the door for them to complete their state license.
Right.
If they're granted a state license and then they receive the zoning relief required from the planning board, then they would be able to operate as a adult use retail and cultivation and product manufacturing establishment within the town.
Okay. I just want to go over that real quick review.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the term sheet basically tracks the numbers in the draft agreement. So the summary of the major terms, I'll start with the payment section, which is section 2. So there's an annual community impact fee, which would be 3% of gross sales paid annually. That fee is renewable after 5 years, but it has an initial lifespan of just a 5-year term. The purpose of those is to basically reimburse the town for any impacts and offset mitigating factors with operation of this establishment. In addition to the community impact fee, we've discussed having an annual community benefit payment. Originally, we proposed $50,000, but we've discussed bringing that down to $25,000 with the idea that if there were 2 establishments licensed to do retail and they each paid $25,000, it could go towards substance abuse mental health services within the town. And one of the principles we talked about there was having it go towards school substance abuse and counseling services. Obviously, this would go to general fund. It would have to be appropriated, but the idea behind having a benefit payment was that this is maybe perhaps a little outside a specific fee, in that not all substance abuse would be related to the Green Lady doing operation here, but it would be a good faith contribution towards certain impacts for substance abuse in the community. In addition, Green Lady has agreed that they could make an annual charitable contribution of $10,000 to the scholarship fund. We had talked initially about having some additional facility cost payment reimbursement. The change that has been discussed from the original term sheet was basically folding all of that into the community impact fee. And part of the reason behind that was that we were able to review some of the proposed financial outlooks for Green Lady, and it appears that the 3% community impact fee would be sufficient to cover the types of costs that we were proposing to have them pay in that subsection. We discussed having a late penalty of 5%, which has been agreed to, and then the other change. So then we're going to have the annual reporting requirement. We had put in language that there would be the ability of the Board of Selectmen to request a financial audit to verify that the payments being received that are based on the percentage are an accurate reflection of the gross sales of the company. So then the other terms, most of these have stayed consistent from what was originally in your packet. There's a provision for local vendor preference and local hiring. There's an agreement to pay all local taxes, even if there was the ability to claim a tax exemption. Security provision requires cooperation with the local police for security measures, which would also include periodic meetings and review of procedures. And probably the most important was anti-diversion protocols. Community impact concerns. This is a provision that would allow abutters to address reasonable concerns through written policies and procedures, which could come before the Board of Selectmen and be incorporated into this agreement to give it a little bit of enforceability. Additional permitting obligations. This is pretty standard in most of these agreements, an obligation to obtain all municipal permits and licenses, but there's no specific obligation of the town to issue those licenses if they do not meet the requirements of the individual licensing boards or permitting entities. So the original term sheet that was provided to you did not have provisions with respect to the electrical usage and renewable energy requirements. Green Lady has proposed some language in that regard, which I've incorporated into that into the term sheet. So there's a commitment from Green Lady to satisfy minimum energy and efficiency requirements, which are going to be established by the CCC. They said they will comply with those by March 23rd of 2019. Commit to use best management practices as determined by the CCC to reduce energy use and consumption. Commitment to ensure that lighting power density will not exceed an average of 36 watts per gross square foot of active growing canopy, and a commitment to use LED lighting, which should offset some of the energy usage.
Can I stop
go
you
ahead.
because I'll forget all my questions. So for this one, the electrical, I'm not an expert on that stuff. I don't really know what that means. Did you review that with them and agree on it? Did we have Lauren Sinatra, who knows this stuff, review it?
So on all of these provisions, 8 through I think it is 11, we sent the provisions that came in from Green Lady to the various departments for some review and comment. We received comment back, I believe, from each of the departments, and I think the only area in which there's some additional language that may not be included in here is from the sewer department. Although I might defer to Libby on whether or not there needs to be further review from the energy department on this provision.
I don't know yet if Lauren had a chance to review it. It was sent to her, but it was a crazy day, and I hardly looked at my computer, so I don't know if she.
On one hand, I don't want to squeeze these businesses where they can't make a profit and be successful.
Yep.
But I also want to make sure our town departments who understand all the specialized knowledge have reviewed it and have time to review it.
Well, here's a question. What is their gross square feet of active and growing canopy? Do you guys have that? Yeah, we can do the numbers.
Hi, how you doing tonight?
Good, nice to see you.
Everybody. Since I was up here, I guess around a year ago, we've been hard at work, under construction. Some of you went to the community outreach meeting that we had and got to see a little bit of that work. So we're working very hard to make the entire building very energy efficient, things like putting in closed cell insulation into all the walls. So we're doing everything we can to be energy efficient. But in regards to this, we're doing about 3,000 square feet of growing space. And the CCC has the strictest energy efficiency regulations of any state in the country right now. So 36 watts per square foot is the most efficient there is, and we're doing LED lighting, which is the most efficient option there is.
And it's expensive, right?
It is very expensive, and there is nothing more efficient right now.
Thank you. Sorry to stop your
Nope, that's
your flow
fine.
there.
So just to put this conversation in context, so I thought this is not ready for our vote because it hasn't been reviewed by all town departments and you haven't gotten all the input from them.
They've all received it. I haven't received all comments back yet, either yay or nay. I think the only one that I haven't heard back from is energy.
But you don't, okay, so.
The other department said that these provisions worked for them.
Yeah. So as a board, if we're uncomfortable with it, because we don't feel like every department's looked at it, we could move it to the next meeting.
Yeah, that was how it was introduced, that it's been reviewed, but I think your question led to a question in my mind about if that's in fact happened, so.
So again, with moving on to water consumption, the applicant has agreed to use best efforts to minimize water consumption at the facility, and they proposed 3 separate areas of doing that: commitment to using hand watering techniques, a commitment to engaging in water-intensive cultivation methods, such as ebb and flow hydroponic cultivation, and an installation of dehumidifiers in each room to collect and reuse moisture and evaporating from plants. Waste water controls, these were reviewed by the sewer department. They're fairly extensive. I don't know if you want me to walk through all of them. I think you have them in front of you. I certainly can, but we could sort of skim through them if you would prefer.
I guess in addition to our own departments, are there other standards that or other, from other towns you've looked at? I mean, how do we know that, that we have everything? Have you compared? I mean, how does this compare to other waste and wastewater control sections in other host community agreements that you've negotiated?
So a lot of this is governed to some degree by existing state law. I will say that this agreement is one of the first that I have done that has this level of detail in the host community agreement provisions. So I think this is really sort of leading the forefront on these types of requirements being built into the actual host community agreement. And what we've really tried to do here is present these as issues to the applicant, concerns that we would have about impacts on the community. And we've asked them to come forward with their proposal to say, how are you going to address this? And what you have in front of you is the response of Green Lady to that request.
Okay.
So if the sewer department or Roberto Public Health came in and wanted to change something, enforce something on a state regulation or even local, they would do that without the host community agreement.
If there was a violation of something that was otherwise governed by state law, you wouldn't need this host community agreement to enforce those provisions. But for example, if we go back to like the energy section, a commitment to use LED lighting is not necessarily something that's required under state regulation or state law, but they have presented this as a commitment that they're willing to make. So, I mean, the board can look at this and you can determine if there are additional things. So for example, I would point out that under the renewable energy requirement, there's not a specific, commitment to use solar or something like that. If there are other concerns that have been raised by the department heads or that the board themselves have, these are issues that could be negotiated under these terms. But these categories are areas in which I have seen communities raise concerns about the impacts with respect to water and energy and odor control. And so I included them in the agreement as a way to facilitate discussion on these points, to make sure that they're not being ignored and that there is some commitment to have a basic level of best control technology in these areas on the part of the applicants.
If we could go to your limitations on use, we've spent some time, and although I don't know if we've taken a board action on it, but we've all raised concerns about the potential of home delivery of these products at some point to be allowed by the CCC. If the board so chose, could that be a limitation that we could impose, that we did not want that to happen on Nantucket, and could that be added to the limitations on use?
I believe there's a limitation in the limitation on use section. There is language with respect to, to on-site social consumption and delivery. The language that we've included is no on-site social consumption or delivery without prior approval of the select board. So,
so that would include home delivery?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank
so
you.
under the terms of this agreement, they would have to come back to you to get approval
Good.
if that became lawful under state law.
I just, to me, I was assuming some other kind of delivery, but if that's what that means, that's great. Thank you.
We can go back to 8 through 11. Is the board okay with that? Do we want further review? Do we want to give direction to?
I got a couple of comments on 8. I think it would behoove the town and you guys to talk to Lawrence Sinatra. There's a lot of money in energy efficiency through the state and the federal government that would help. I mean, you're going to use a fair amount of electricity. I'm not concerned about the kilowatts. The 36 times 3,000 gets you to 36,000. It's $622 electric bill for their lights a month. It's going to be something like that. So that one doesn't, and that's not that high compared to the rest of some of the bills that some of us get for other, for walk-ins, let's say. But so I think I think that's all right. But I think there are probably some savings and some energy efficiency you could do with solar and things. The only concern I had was on number 2F on the annual reporting. I think the big problem is if you audit, it's expensive to audit. But what I would suggest is financials be provided, just regular financials off QuickBooks or whatever you're using, quarterly, yearly, say quarterly, and audit at request of the select board. And that way, the numbers would be coming in on a regular basis. The select board doesn't have to think about it because we've got a million other things and say, gee whiz, did we ask for that? And ask Libby, did you ask for that? Oh, we forgot to ask. Let's just make it a regular occurrence. And then if there's an issue, it's all there and we can look at it. But that would be my only change.
I agree with that, Matt. I had a question mark on that as well. Financials aren't too hard, but audit's expensive.
Exactly.
That would be at our request if there was some issue.
I believe that's actually how the agreement is structured. It may not be quite accurately reflected in the term sheet, but there's a provision that basically says they will provide their annual financial documents in the same form that they would be required to report to the state. If there is some concern on the part of the board about whether or not, there's some inaccuracies or whether or not you're collecting the full percentage under the agreement, there's the ability of the Board of Selectmen to request an independent financial audit if necessary.
I think what Matt's saying, just send us your quarterly financial statements.
Yeah, send you quarterly. We put them in a file.
Put that in the agreement.
Yeah, we put them in a file. And if if Brian looks at them and says, geez, these aren't, something's here, then we go further. But my sense is they're going to run a good business and it's going to be there and it's not a big deal. So,
I mean, we have to have some way of documenting the sales.
To determine the percentage.
Yeah, right. So that's
we have to have.
That would be fine. And actually, the nice thing about a request like this in our situation is we're so managed and micromanaged with the software that we use that providing additional information to you is actually
Great.
not a big deal.
Thank you.
Every little piece of this is already tracked through a software program. So it's okay, and I'd be glad to do that.
well, thank you. That's great.
So we'll add that.
Any comments on the edibles on 12B? You guys fine with that?
So the edible language is something that sort of has been the subject of discussion even as late as today as to how that could potentially be governed. And one of the possibilities that we talked about, which we have not formalized language around, is providing the Board of Health the ability to review products prior to them being marketed or sold to determine whether or not they are sort of appropriately packaged such that they wouldn't be attractive to minors.
You guys better not be reviewing them before the meeting. That's all I have to say.
So can we get Roberta maybe to comment on that and how he might do that and what he'd be looking for and.
Yes, we actually met today about that about an hour and a half ago. One of the things that we're mostly looking for on our end, in the Board of Health side, is really what's in the ingredients. As far as the marketing goes, I'm not exactly sure that should be in the Board of Health's hands, but if that's what the Select Board believes is the best way, then we'd be happy to take care of that. But really, it's on the back of the package that I'm most worried about, making sure people label their ingredients correctly, that when they put the percentage of what oils are in there and the capacity and things like that. That's more what I'm worried about. The marketing side, we're not marketing professionals.
This just says prior to being marketed. So that's not, they're not asking you to comment or opine on the marketing.
Yeah.
So I think, I think this should include more of Roberto's comments in terms of ingredients, and I mean, I don't know what maybe works. I think this can be beefed up a little bit.
So the part of the reason that this language is in here in the first instance is that when we negotiated an agreement with Green Lady with respect to the medical side, we had included a provision that basically said that they would not sell any marijuana product that was in the form of candy. Now, under the adult use regulations, there are some fairly strict regulations that pertain to what edibles, what form they can take. So you can sell candy under the state law, but it can't take the form of any fruit or human or cartoon or gummy bear. The candy has to be marketed in a way, it cannot look like commercially available candy. You can't have something that looks like it sort of is a Snickers bar with the packaging, even though it's called something different.
You can't have Hello Kitty on the outside.
It can't market with cartoon characters. Exactly. So the board has expressed concern in the past about the sale of edibles in the form of candy. So this language was sort of included as a way to address those concerns as to whether or not candy products could be sold in the adult use side, given that there's a particular restriction at the same establishment for candy on the medical side. And one thought was to have the Board of Health perhaps give an approval of a product since they're marketing their own product, to address any concerns that might come about, not necessarily as to whether it complies with the state law, because obviously it's going to have to comply with the state regulations. But if there are other concerns that had come up with respect to the form in which their candy or chocolate or other enticing to minor products, what form it is taking. So this was, again, language that was being discussed as late as today to try and find a way to capture the essence of the state regulations, but also allow for some local review and control.
Something could come into play.
Sorry.
Something could come into play that's, maybe not as cute as the things that they've contemplated, but a chocolate might be in the shape of Nantucket. And it just might be a prettier thing, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Or brownie?
Or maybe they make a chocolate in a W.
Well, I'll tell you, the individual and I don't mean this flippantly even, but the person that has the best firsthand knowledge about the impact this has on the school system is our superintendent, who came and talked about an instance where a child came in under the influence of a marijuana edible product. So, those are the folks that are dealing with this on a frontline basis. I don't know if that's something the Board of Health is interested in doing, but
when it comes to the use of the product, it's really hard to deal with what somebody's going to do once the product gets brought home. We can't hold the Green Lady or Mass Medi Spa or Act Natural or Organic 365 to 253. We won't be able to hold them responsible for what a parent does with their brownie.
No, I understand that. Yeah.
So that is a behavioral issue that is kind of part of that social determinants of health part of the health department, and we can definitely monitor it and study it and release a report about it. As far as like a chocolate in the shape of a Nantucket or the Whalers sign, that's something I never thought of. And it's a good point in my conversations with Green Lady. There was no, it didn't seem like the attempt was there. but I definitely understand where this can come into play. And thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. We can work with the applicants and look at all the, if it's going to be if there's going to be gummies, if there's going to be things like that. We can definitely look at that and assess it.
And I don't think the idea was necessarily to give the Board of Health a full veto power of any product, but maybe to solicit their input as an entity that would have some ability to give some guidance with respect to those types of concerns of the enticement of the product to minors. Again, this language may need some to be further refined. But this was sort of an idea that was discussed.
I like the idea, and I like what you just said, just kind of beefing it up a little bit, the language. So the Board of Health and Public Health has more direction. I had one side question on the medical side of it. A lot of elders aren't going to smoke marijuana. They need to eat it. Can that be done through the medical card versus do we have to have it for adult use? I want to make sure it's there for people who are going to smoke it and who need it medically.
You're absolutely right that being able to eat it is important. And just I'll answer that in a second, but I wanted to back up for a second. One of the things you also have to realize is, unlike stores that you might go into to buy other food items, these products are all in child-proof packaging. They're all opaque, so you can't see what's inside them. So whatever is inside them, you wouldn't know by looking on the outside. Children can't get it open, and they have very plain labeling on it. So nothing on the labels are enticing. So when they leave the store, everything about what they're taking out with them is completely inaccessible, unenticing to children. So that's kind of what your point is. If when they get home, if somebody doesn't put the cap on or close the bag, that's one thing. But what they leave the store with won't be interesting to children at all. But what you were saying is about the medical and if needing it on the other side. I actually get a lot of inquiries all the time through our website, and especially for Nantucket, because there's so many people that come to the island from other states and other places, where they're inquiring about products for their medical issues, but because they come from other states, they can't buy it.
That's right.
So I actually got some emails this week from some people visiting Nantucket, summer residents, excited that we're going to be opening and having products to help them sleep. That's actually one of the most common questions I get. A little 5 milligram cube will help them get through the night and not use those the machines for the sleep apnea. So, and I have to email them all the time and tell them very nicely, because they're always outpouring their emotions and their need for this, that even when they come here under the medical license, they can't get it because they are not a Massachusetts resident. So for all those people, being able to purchase it recreationally is important to them. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I will attest that the packaging is hard to open. She showed it to me, and I couldn't get it open. So. Oh, I know.
Kate, is there anything else you wanted to review with us?
So then, I don't know that there were any other changes from what was originally in your packet. There's a reopener provision. The term of the agreement, this is perhaps one nuance to just highlight. The community impact fee is what has a 5-year lifespan, and that's in section 2. The agreement as a whole would survive that 5-year renewal. You would just be amending the community impact fee on a 5-year basis. But otherwise, the rest of the terms would remain constant as long as the entity was in business.
And why would we want, since this is, wouldn't we want to just renegotiate the whole agreement if the annual community impact fee goes away at the end of 5 years?
Well, the annual community impact fee doesn't necessarily go away.
It gets
entirely.
renegotiated.
You get to renegotiate
Right.
it.
So so why don't we renegotiate the whole agreement?
Certainly that is the board's prerogative. If you wanted to make it a 5-year agreement in its entirety, you could do that. It opens up all of the provisions, including the other benefit payment provisions for renegotiation at that point in time.
I just had one question on the terms of agreement, more so for the sake of consistency and future host community agreements. I don't think it's the case with Green Lady, but going back to that idea of if we were to agree to this host community agreement, the term of if they don't open, if it took them 2 or 3 years and now they essentially have the license and the permit, is there any way, say for future agreements, where we can include some set of, if you're not up and running within a certain number of
Well,
years?
and we could include it in this agreement too. Basically a sunset provision that sort of looked at if there's substantial, work has not commenced, or if, a license hasn't been obtained by a certain date, that this agreement would basically terminate in the event that there was not progress towards opening the establishment.
That's the one, going back, that I think that
Yeah, I think
touches
that's a
on
good
what we had
idea.
an issue with.
Because we're
And-
trying to come up with a model here, not just
Yeah.
for one organization.
And I also think just figuring out a way to do it that's fair in light of the fact that some of these things, we have the moratorium and some of these dates aren't even set yet. So if there's a way to at least have it there as a template, knowing it may not be necessary in this instance.
Sure. Yeah.
I apologize to pick through this. In the big agreement, the bigger one, there's police officer training. Company shall reimburse the town for actual costs. So let's say it's $15,000 for, every year. Does that get split between both licenses? Does one pay it? How?
Well, so if you look in the updated version where we see subsection 2D, reimbursement of annual municipal costs, including police officer training, what we're proposing now, based on the financials that were submitted, is that we would just roll that in. So if you get 3% and it ends up being $200,000, and you want to spend $15,000 of that on police officer training, it comes out of that community impact fee.
Got it. Okay.
I just had, so tell me more, give me some history about the reduction in the 50,000 from the annual community benefit payment from 50 to 25. I mean, 25 is not very much money to implement additional substance abuse and mental health services. And I'd like to understand why that's been cut in half.
So the $50,000 was just a term that, together in consultation with town manager and chair of the select board, we selected a figure that was based on what it would cost to include, basically to fund a position, for example, at the high school, like a full-time substance abuse counselor at the high school. The salary range would probably be somewhere around that. So that's the number that we selected. Now, the community impact fee, we didn't really have a sense of what that would be, whether it would be $30,000 or $300,000. So the reduction in that was based primarily on the fact that the financials seem to indicate that there would be likely a higher, the town is going to get more money than perhaps originally calculated under the 3%, and that if the town decided to do the 2 licenses, which was sort of the way that this was heading, and we had 2 host community agreements, then the cost of that position as an additional benefit payment would be split between the two adult use licenses. And there's a clear statutory basis for the impact fee. The community benefit payment is not something specifically contemplated in the statute. It's really kind of a good faith additional contribution that's being offered by the applicant, and not all communities are able to get these payments. I think so.
But the earlier action we took, which is to reduce the, which will, for this adult use host community agreement, which really gives the entity that we entered into these agreements, almost a real franchise. And we even talked about the potential financial benefit in terms of the transferring of a license in a future date. So I don't. To me, $50,000 is very reasonable, if not low. So I don't see a reason to knock that number down. And tying it to necessarily to an FTE, I'm really looking at the dollar amount and what that dollar amount could do. So if you want to argue the point, 50,000 doesn't include the 30 or 40% benefits we have, so that's another 20. So we could argue and debate that, but I think 50,000 is a reasonable amount.
I have a question. What estimate for sales did you guys use on the 3%?
Them speak to them.
All right.
I have a summary here, and it was being updated today. That's why I didn't receive it. But when I'm sure you'll get a copy of this. But on the first page, it estimates the total payments that the town will receive, which includes, in this case, it was the annual town community benefit payment of $25,000. The first year, the 3% impact payment came to $117,000. The 3% local option tax came to $105,000, and the charitable donation of $10,000. So the first year we're looking at about $272,000. By the third year, that estimate goes up to $494,000 to the town of Nantucket.
Big numbers.
But again, all of this goes to the general fund, with the exception of the community benefit payment and the scholarship fund, and those numbers are not escalating based on any kind of percentage of sales. So this is it's a small amount of money to tell our community that as a board we're committed to our scholarship fund and the issue of substance abuse.
How's the board feel? Are we getting closer to approving this? Do we want to move it to the 25th? Do we want to make a motion on some of Jim's suggestions? Rita, do you have something to say?
No, I was just sort of contemplating the 25,000 versus 50,000.
Do we feel comfortable that it's been reviewed enough by departments? There's enough state regulations, water, electric use, all that.
I wouldn't mind. I mean, I think we're close, but I wouldn't mind one more meeting to really finally review and just discuss. Make sure that it's been reviewed by when it needs to be reviewed by, and the 25,000 is thought about.
I'd like to make a motion to put it over to the 25th.
Second.
Any discussion?
As a friendly amendment, could we ask them to go back and request the $50,000 for mental health services?
Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I can speak to the 50,000.
Sure.
So I just want to say thank you.
I'm sorry. I was asking that we're in the middle of making motions and taking votes, and I proposed that as a friendly amendment.
And I allowed him to speak.
You did. Okay, I didn't hear that.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in the interest of efficiency, I wanted to, Adam Fine on behalf of Green Lady, I'm their counsel, and I want to thank the town. I do agree with my colleague from Coleman and Page that is a very thorough agreement. We were trying to be we didn't want to be heavy-handed. Nicole really wanted to put her best foot forward with respect to this agreement. I did want to speak to the 25,000 if I could. The reason, so this is a difference of, it was primarily me, so I want to, who was pushing back on that. And the reason for it is Ms. Lockman and I have a disagreement about the legality of anything over 3%. In my interpretation, the state law is quite clear that 3% is the maximum that we'd be allowed to under law to pay. I think charitable donations, would be fine. I was uncomfortable with the 50,000 payment. This is kind of a hot topic in the industry, and there's some good faith disagreements between council. I don't know. I don't want to speak for Nicole on whether or not, but I think she would be amenable to it. I just wanted to note, my concerns that anytime we're exceeding 3%. We've done this in a lot of cities and towns, and most cities and towns, I believe, are sticking to the 3%, primarily because of what the law says. But we were comfortable with it. We certainly would offer it as a minimum payment. We would prefer that it be offset. But if the town wants it to be additional, we would vow not to ever challenge it as an applicant, but we can't say that the commission in its capacity will accept it.
Okay.
So that was the pushback.
Thank you. Okay, so you're making a friendly on amendment to move it to 50,000 for review. Is there anything else we'd like to see for next week? Or 2 weeks? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Sorry, so what are you voting on? The friendly amendment or the
No,
original motion
I think to move it to next week.
without a vote?
Yeah, I guess we're voting to not vote.
And then, well,
But I offered a friendly amendment to add.
we
to-
voted yes on the friendly amendment.
Yes.
And now we have to take a vote.
Yeah,
to
okay.
Continue it. Right?
Do you need a vote to continue?
Okay, so you want,
So I move that we continue it till next time. We don't need that?
That would
Okay, all right. I thought we needed to do motions.
Is there anything else that you'd like town administration or Katie to look at for next week? So they have time. Is there anything else that we missed?
One other question I had to Jim's point about the limitations on use. Do we need to specify home delivery?
We can include that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rita. That's what I was getting at.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie.
Next item is our annual water quality action update. We have a kind of a staff group with different departments working on a variety of water quality initiatives, and we've been giving the board an annual review right around this time of year. So they are each going to give their review, the departments, beginning with the health department. How you doing? They're going to be brief but thorough.
So I brought my PowerPoint presentation. It's only 22 pages. All right, so the three things that I have to cover with the two members that are missing. The first thing is that we're looking to do amendments to the current. Oh, there it is. It's right up on the wall. Awesome. Thank you. All right. The first one is going to be an amendment to the septic system regulations. We've realized that with some of the work that's being done to test out the water quality out there and some of the landfill questions that were raised with the previous sewer systems, we've realized as a board and as a staff in general that we should make all our decisions that's evidence-based and with proper information. So we're looking to push back the Nantucket implementation that would require them to do IA systems at all failure, transfer, or upgrades to the households. That was supposed to be set forth on July 1st of 2019. We're looking to push it back maybe a year. The second thing that we're looking into is this last year, we've enacted the well testing regulation. And since last August, when this regulation came into effect, late August, we've already had 278 well tests, which is just a little bit less than one a day. But when we think about how the well tests are only ever sent out once a week, Tuesday mornings on the boat, that's actually a lot. That's a lot of tests every week, and that's including days that the boats have been canceled, so the wells haven't been able to get tested. So that's doing pretty well. We've got all the data input, and I'm currently running some statistics on it. I'll be able to have a nice report written out by the end of the summer about where our low risk, medium risks, and high risk wells are, and where we should probably focus our next steps. And then thirdly, this year, we started doing the beach water sampling ourselves in the health department. We were farming it out to the natural resources department for the last 2 years. But we found that efficiency-wise and effectiveness would be a little bit easier by keeping it in-house so that we can keep that chain of custody thing going without having to worry about possible issues in the cold chain between transfers. So far, none of the beaches have failed, knock on wood, and we should be good to go. So, quick and thorough.
With the amount of testing you're doing, At some point, does it make sense to be doing that on island?
Absolutely.
To set up, because how much are we spending? And
Absolutely. So, health department alone, just because we do the beach sampling, our samples are only in around the 15,000 to 20,000 range. It depends on how many resamples that have to be sent out. However, between sewer, drinking water, NRD, the landfill, all these other types of testing, plus the septic system testing that we do require, it would make a lot of sense to get it done on island. And that's a conversation that we've been having. I don't know if it's part of any of the other updates, but it's definitely something we're looking into.
okay.
Thank you, Roberto. Natural Resources?
Second remember the order. Good evening, Jeff Carlson from the Natural Resources Department. I'll try to be as brief as Roberto. So first off, the fertilizer regulations. That's another program that we do jointly with the Health Department. They are the actual regulation holders. We've completed our yearly license and training sessions under the current platform. And we currently have about 425 license holders that have completed the program. So it's been a program that, 4 years ago, we weren't licensing anyone to up to 425. We've identified some issues with the training and have been trying to switch to a more field-based training and a more practical training instead of a, kind of a geoscience or geotechnical. And we've actually started filming that new coursework. Roberto and I completed our section of that training 2 weeks ago, and we're hoping to have that rolled out for next year's kind of training season, which usually runs anywhere from March until June. And we try to offer that at least weekly through March and April, and then kind of every other week for May and June as those staffs fill out. So hopefully we'll have that up and running. The Fertilizer Advisory Committee has been extremely helpful in putting that together, and that group of landscapers who are on that committee are going to be shooting the other sections that talk about more things like calibration, how to reuse fertilizer bags, and get to kind of the nitty-gritty of that program. We've also been doing enforcement and have been out quite regularly. Hank at the health department was really great this year, and I know did a lot of stops, and our staff did a number of stops. And we feel that program is still evolving, but it's improving. The water quality testing for the harbors and ponds, I won't go into it too much because we gave that full presentation to you guys on the 9th of May, as that says, and I don't want to have you guys sit through that twice. That being said, I'll put a little plug in for it. Next week, we've partnered up again with the Nantucket Land Council, and next Thursday, we'll be doing the second State of the Harbor presentation at the Great Harbor Yacht Club. We definitely encourage it's open to the public, people to come. It's a little bit more focused and a little bit more in depth on a few of the topics we talked about then. Can you scroll down a little bit more, Erica? Sorry, I just want to make sure I get everything in there. To get into some specifics that we didn't talk about in our regular address, and Caitlin Shaw is here if we have questions that are really specific. She's really kind of our expert in this. Last year we did complete, we had our third season of being within our TMDL range for Long Pond as part of that sub-embayment that was there. We did our first benthic in-faunal survey, and it showed an increase from 2003 to current in both species richness and diversity. So it looks like that is starting to show some improvement in starting to restore. We've started another citizen science project to help locate our harmful algal blooms. And Caitlin and Leah in our office have been doing that. We did some outreach at the UMass field station. We continue with some additional testing for both boat use areas and harmful algal blooms within the harbor. So looking for things like cochladinium, which is our rust tide, which we've already had some reports of this year, and some other things. Probably the bullet here that I'm most excited about, and it's a little bit nerdy at the same time, is we've partnered with MIT to help put a web-based platform together to make our water quality data completely usable and searchable by anyone with a computer. And it will be available to the public. I know Caitlin just told me tonight that they're even taking the water quality data that we've collected from our sans this year, and we'll be adding that in. So it's going to be kind of a actively updating system. And again, I think we're excited that it has a mapping interface and everything's there so people can see what's going on as far as water quality data and have it searchable. So if you're only looking for dissolved oxygen, you can find dissolved oxygen. If you want temperature, you can look at temperature. The interface that they showed us and just a kind of a come down and take a look at it, it was really cool. It's really slick and it's fun to play with.
That's not nerdy. That's very cool.
Yeah, so we're excited about that. I know we always get asked that, you know, our presentations just can be kind of sciencey and kind of cumbersome, that let people to see the actual data and manipulate it themselves. And what we're really hoping from that is that other researchers and things will be able to tap into that water quality data and say, we want to come to Nantucket to start looking at other issues in the harbor, and we have all this awesome data that's really accessible and easy for us to use. So it's it'll be an awesome tool once it finally launches. And I'll ask Caitlin real quick. Do you know when that estimated is going to be available-ish? Yeah, so hopefully by the end of the summer, that'll be up and launched, but we'll definitely let that know.
Jeff, I know one of the difficulties in all the different water quality testing that we've had over the years, it's hard to put it all together and find patterns. And so this is the first step to doing that.
Yeah, it'll be a big step. And one of the nice things that it also does is it's also able to convert units. So if there's data that may be a different unit, you can convert, and so everything can be fairly comparable. Obviously, testing has improved over time, but it's going to be a great tool. To kind of gloss over the last two that's there, the green crab removal, again, we've partnered with the Land Council to do kind of a population assessment in parts of the harbor to kind of scope a larger study and what the green crab population would be, and that will lead us to hopefully some management options for reduction of their population, as they're an invasive species and cause some harm to eelgrass and to our shellfish communities. And we think it's important to start working towards getting a better handle on that population. We had worked with Carl Sherlin previously on some trapping of that. And I think the real limiting factor was that Carl was able to catch lots and lots of crabs, but then what do you do with them? And they got all outsourced for, you know, potential fertilizer to bartlets in a few spots. But it's really something that I think if our population look shows something that's really problematic, it may be something where you're also looking to generate some level of commercial interest into green crabs. Not for us to do, but something that's there. Eelgrass health. We, again, are still doing our regular eelgrass surveys. A project that's coming in front of the Conservation Commission at our next meeting is a project that we've been working on with the Land Council again at restoring eelgrass in the Monomoy Shimo area, in an area that's water quality appropriate. So that's coming forward. And then we'll be doing our eelgrass health and assessments later this summer. I think that's it for us for right now.
Thanks, Jeff. DPW.
Good evening. So with regard to water quality improvements, big steps in stormwater management, coordinating with various departments include drafting and developing a stormwater bylaw with accompanying regulations, and a reboot of the Consu Springs project in partnership with the Conservation Foundation, the Land Council, and the Land Bank. We've made great strides with the regulators with the conceptual changes that we're looking to make with that project. So we're excited to be moving that design effort forward in the coming months. At the landfill, we're not only continuing our annual required statutory testing of the groundwater as far as the landfill monitoring goes, but we're expanding that from last year just doing nutrient concentration testing to this year expanding the nutrient concentration testing and also extrapolating that data into a loading analysis to actually see what nutrients are in fact getting into Long Pond and at what quantity that's happening. We're also looking to, we have restored a well series that was part of the original monitoring series that was lost when apparently the old radio tower was demolished. So the Waste Options folks have, at their cost, restored that well series in a very close location that's been brought back online by our consultants and will be added into the series of testing moving forward. We are also working with Land Council at a couple of locations around town, one being the landfill site, to identify some opportunities to improve the existing on-site stormwater management system. These were designed back in the, I believe, late 80s, early 90s. And as we've seen with some of the severe storm events through the past year, they get stressed out and flood. So we want to do what we can to improve not just the operation and maintenance of those systems, but see if they can be redesigned and or improved to handle some of these larger and more frequent storm events we're experiencing. Ongoing with the closed circuit television condition assessment of our stormwater infrastructure, primarily focused right now in the downtown area, and even more focused in the tributary watershed of the Children's Beach pump station. Then the Nantucket culvert assessment, that's going to kick off this month. And the Land Council is we're working with the Land Council to do stormwater sampling in the harbor watershed. That's it.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Sewer?
Good evening, David Gray. There's a lot of stuff on the board. I won't go through it all. I'll just touch on some of the bigger stuff. Surfside wastewater upgrades continuing quite well. We've had a few hiccups here and there, but that's to be expected. Some delays because of winter, but everything's moving ahead quite nicely. C Street Pump Station, Jason was down today actually for a tour. We've started the epoxy coating of all the concrete surfaces that are going to have any contact with wastewater. So that process is well underway. If anyone has been down, there's a huge difference in the last few months. The flood wall's all in, almost all the brickwork's done. We're just continuing forward with that. There were some delays because of the force main failure and weather. Harbor Schimmel project has come to its summer hiatus. All the mainline sewer work in Schimmel has been completed. All the main lines are in, including future lines for expanded areas down the line. They will be back sometime after Columbus Day to begin again. There's been some comments and stuff on some of the roads conditions that we've left for temporary pavement, which we're going to be getting to in the fall to resurface a lot of the roads. New pump stations have been installed. Somerset Road, Hussey Farm areas have been addressed. I've been working very closely with administration on Somerset Road. We're moving forward with some more drainage issues. There's more consultant work going on the Sconset plant. We received our new CCTV vehicle truck for the Schimmel project. We just had 2 days worth of training from the factory. The truck went live today to do some stuff. Actually, we're going to be live tomorrow morning early, out checking a couple of spots that we have to get in the road for traffic. But that truck is here. We're going to be working closely with Rob at the DPW in the future with being able to go and camera the lines and find out what's going on without having to, do exploratory digging or anything like that. So a lot of good stuff going on. All the testing has been completed from the sewer force main failure in the harbor. Been working very closely with Roberto and Jeff and everything like that with all the testing. So things are moving ahead very nicely.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Mark, want to comment water?
Hi, how are you guys? So we're still going with all of our required testing. The quantity and quality of the aquifer is still really strong. The water main replacement program is going to continue. Last winter, we put our project off with everything that went on during that storm. We didn't feel that it was appropriate to put that much pressure on the community to do that project. We've teamed up with DPW and Sewer to move forward with the North Liberty, Lily Brush, Darrymore area. From now on, I think the cooperation between the three departments is going to continue to grow. And we'll try to do more and more of these together. So when we go into an area, it'll be done one time, all get finished. We are still waiting. The most important thing on the list here is still waiting for the 20-year water withdrawal permit. They offered 5%. We asked for 15%. So last year we pumped 102% of our permit. They were okay with that. They gave us a 5% thinking that would cover it. But I will already say that we've already had our first 4 million gallon day. We usually don't see that till the end of July, early August. So pumping is up this summer. It's putting a little bit of stress on the system. We've had several leaks in the last few weeks. I know there's a group on the Cape and the Islands, been working with them, working with the DEP to try to get the numbers we need. They're talking about a mitigation plan where we could, for every piece of land in your zone 2 that's locked up in conservation, whether it land bank or Concom or anything town-owned, they will give us extra gallons to pump for every piece of acreage that's locked up. So that might be a way to get to our 15%. They haven't said no. They are open to negotiation. We are continuing talking. I think they're putting the time in because they realize this is for a long time. It's a 20-year permit. So once it's in, it's not set in stone, but it takes a lot to change it.
Yeah, is this a math equation or a political equation?
I think it's a little of both. What's happening is we're an unassessed, what they call an unassessed basin. So whatever they approve for us, someone as such in Ipswich River Basin is going to see what they do here, and they're going to push for what we get. Right. So it's more than just Nantucket. It's whatever they allow us to, they're going to have to allow others to do.
But is there math to it where we look and say if we pump this much, eventually
Yes.
we're going to be out?
Yes. So there is math involved. We have a 3D groundwater model that we've been using. We've done 60-year continuous pumping rate test at that increased 15%, and we show no saltwater intrusion in the deeper wells.
Right. And you haven't gone through the lens into the stuff that's
haven't gone through the lens into
you've
the
stayed
lower
in
one
the
yet. We're staying above. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's really not an issue of quantity. It's the mechanics to get it out, and the Commonwealth owns the resource, so they can dictate what we pump.
I would argue that, but we don't have time tonight.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A couple other things that, just so that you understand that they're underway. Nantucket Water Quality Improvement Study is underway isn't quite underway yet, but we are arranging for some modeling with SMAS, and there should be a contract before you sometime in the next month or so, hopefully. We've met with Nantucket stakeholders about that. Gray water discharge is an ongoing issue monitored by the Marine Department. Random compliance checks occur. There are handouts that are regularly distributed, and we've got the Marine Department pump out boat, which is quite active. We've updated our water quality webpage. We're continually updating it, and we are going to be reviewing, probably once summer's over, the sort of renewal or how we are going to renew or update our harbor plan, which expires in 2019. And just some new items that the board is well aware of. The Stop the Straw campaign is underway, and the board has a water quality goal contained within the strategic plan. And we just wanted to make a note that after the January 4th sewer force main break, there was temporary discharge into Nantucket Harbor. As we know, it had been authorized by DEP. We've done a follow-up testing in the weeks subsequent to the discharge, and that revealed that the initial elevated levels of contamination were reduced to normal levels within about a month. And there was no damage to shellfish beds, areas of the harbor, anything like that, that was detected. So we've gotten a little bit of question about that this summer. Okay, thank you all departments for those reports. The next item is the timeline for the 2019 annual town meeting. The timeline's in your packet. It's been reviewed by the various individuals who are involved in town meeting. And there's probably a couple of minor date changes that will happen, but essentially the town meeting would be Monday, April 1st. The election would be Tuesday, April 9th. And the schedule's a bit tight, but it's about the same as last year, this 2018. Any issues? Comments? Pretty straightforward, I would say. Okay. Would you say that you are endorsing it?
I'd say it's,
Yes.
I saw
Yes.
nods.
Yes.
Unanimous.
I see we're going to do April Fool's Day. I think that's great.
It's appropriate.
So I make a motion that the board endorse the proposed 2019 annual town meeting timeline.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, now everyone can start working on their April Fool's jokes.
I would say would be that everybody always, I think it's October 17th and 18th, town council is available for citizen warrant articles. It's set out now.
Yeah.
Everyone says afterwards they didn't know about it, and it's a short time, but we can push it out as much as possible. from now
Yep.
until then.
Yep. Okay, next, I've prepared a draft scope for a senior center feasibility study committee. It's in the packet. This comes out of the Nantucket Center for Elder Affairs recent senior needs assessment, and they came and reviewed that with you, maybe it was about a month ago or maybe a little bit more than that. And as a result, one of the recommendations is to examine a new senior center. And so one of the first steps to do that would be establishing some kind of a feasibility study. So that's where a feasibility study committee. That's what other towns tend to do. So I just put this together. I've reviewed it with some of the people that are involved, and I think they felt that it was covered what they were anticipating. But if we are going to move forward on this, then I think we'd bring forward some names for you to make an appointment to this group, or sort of establish the group at a subsequent meeting. I already have a member from the finance committee that was appointed at that group's meeting yesterday, and I can get others. We'll need one from you all if you want to move forward.
Do you want a motion?
Motions are always good.
Motion to establish the committee based on this outline.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm in favor of this, a committee and doing this. There's nothing wrong with that. My only caution is we still have issues we have the unresolved issues with the island home that I think take precedent over this, and some of them are the difficult issues of operating and running something like that. And so I know this is a different animal, but sometimes I don't want to lose I don't want to lose staff time and focus on something that is very important and needs to be solved. And it's more than just a building. So, so I get worried sometimes that we overextend ourselves because people say, geez, we really want this, but we're having a hard enough time doing what we do already. So, it's nothing wrong with having the committee, but when it comes back, I hope that we have the guts to prioritize stuff and push the things that are most important to the top. So, anyway.
But we haven't heard, I agree with you totally, but for good or ill, we've not heard a constituency of folks in the community that either one way or the other are concerned about currently, since we took our action, or lack of action at the town meeting, about the future of the island home. We talked about doing, I think, an operational review. We're going to be looking at doing some internal construction, but the future of the island home, both financially and from a physical plant, is, is a big concern. And we're the ones that make the priorities as a board. So if that's something we want folks to spend time on, we should have a conversation about that at a future meeting.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Matt, for mentioning that. There is no question that we're overextended. And we're just trying to get at everything that we can, however we can. But I did want to mention just two things. The last action the board took, not that this is on the agenda, but about the island home, was to determine what it would take to have a renovated or new facility at the current site. And admittedly, that has gone on perhaps a bit too long, but most recently we had a group reviewing the scope of work that we hope to bring before you in the form of a contract shortly, probably at your next meeting, just FYI. And if you would be good enough to appoint a board member to the study committee, one of you, if you are ready to do that tonight.
Is there any interest from anybody? Volunteer before we all.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Unless somebody else wants to.
I was just about to volunteer, but
Oh,
if you want it.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you. That's it for town manager's report.
Okay. Thank you, Libby. Moving on to the select board's report, we have action to consider imposition of suspension of 1709 Associates DBA 29 Fair Street liquor license pursuant to June 28, 2018 ABCC decision. I think Amy's going to kind of walk us through. It's a little.
And I'm pretty sure this is one I abstained on because they're customers. So I don't think I was involved in the first go round. So
I think, you do have the chronology from our attorneys. I'm sure you all know the history that we've gone through. This is just the ABCC came down with the decision as far as we went up for hearings back in October, I think. It's been a long time waiting as far as their review of the board's decisions and sanctions based on the several violations from 29 Fair Street during compliance checks, and also in regards to the dispute over whether they properly changed a manager or had the manager in place that they said. And basically, the ABCC came back and agreed with half and disagreed with others, basically saying that the 3-day suspension already served in 2016 and an additional 2 days from the 2016 violation was sufficient discipline for the 2 compliance check violations. They disagreed with the additional 11 days or total of 11 days that were put on them for the improper change of manager, which they didn't find enough evidence per se to rule in favor of that. So I won't relitigate that discussion, but that was their decision. So what's in front of the board now is 2 things. They already served 3 days, so there's an additional 2 days that the board can apply to this season and choose those days. What the licensee has is reviewing this 30 days to file a
appeal.
Thank you. File an appeal. And if not, then so what I would suggest is they have those 30 days. I believe this was issued on June the 28th. Therefore, starting if they don't do anything by the week of, say, July the 30th, then that is mute, and then the board can apply those days there. So my suggestion would be to set those days, possibly that weekend, August 3rd and 4th, and see if that materializes in that time being. I'm not sure what the licensee, I did let them know that we were going to discuss this, but again, it's not a hearing, so we weren't required to have them here. It's for your discussion. So any questions?
So if we assign the dates, August 3rd, so they have, just clarify the 30 days. So they have 30 days after we
to appeal.
Assign them?
They have 30 days to appeal the ABCC decision to court from the day that it was applied by the ABCC, which was June the 28th.
So we can assign those dates today.
Correct.
And then
that would be my suggestion. That gives them that time, so it wasn't before that.
All right. No? Sounds good.
Fine.
So make a motion that we assign those 2 dates of August 3rd and 4th.
Correct.
As stipulated in the, findings of the ABCC.
Second. Correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, our last item for your committee reports, review the final draft town comments on Surfside Crossing 40B application to the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals. All right, so we are looking to finalize this and maybe discuss independent
Yep,
studies.
so first off, the letter that is in the packet is a revised draft. And what I tried to do was make note of your comments from the June 27th meeting and how they were worked into the draft letter. So first off, we added a limitation on the rental of market rate units. That's in item 15. This town council and I reviewed all of this, and there may be some other sort of minor grammatical wording changes here and there that I didn't make note of here, but I fixed up the format a little bit. We tightened up the wording to add more musts, less shoulds. We did that in several areas. We added wording to emphasize concerns with impervious surfaces, and that's addressed in the sections noted, or the items sections noted there, 4, 5, 7. I think that was it.
So on the shoulds and musts, how did you decide to, because I still see a lot of shoulds in here. So why did you keep some shoulds and put some musts in, and what was your criteria
I think
for that?
the general sort of recommendation was if you have too many musts, it's just not going to be taken seriously by the.
I know, but that's fine. But what's the criteria? So here it says applicant should be required to pay water connection fees, cost and fees. So
I guess for something
I
like
guess we're
that-
saying, well, that's so that maybe that isn't that important. But then, another area was so you must have applied some criteria. I'd just like to know what that was.
Well, for something like the fees, they won't. There's no way to require them to pay the fees.
Okay.
So I guess I tried to pick out the things that there is not a requirement to maintain should, and where
Okay.
it was sort of vague or not clear, or not subject to that, I just change it to must. But yeah, feel free to change it all to.
All right. And I know this, just above that, it says, maybe this is one of the grammatical, I wasn't sure. It says the proposed 266 parking spaces equals a lot of cars. Now, does that mean a lot like a parking lot of cars, or a lot meaning like a large number of cars parked in a small area? And I didn't really understand what that,
Where's this?
just above, Jeff, where I said the water connection fees, the bullet point above that.
What number are you at?
Number 4,
Number
last
4.
paragraph.
That was already in the prior draft. I didn't touch that.
Keep going down. There.
No, I know, but I'm just, okay.
Oh, do you mean? I see what you mean.
I think it means many.
Like yeah, many.
It means many.
Not a parking lot of cars, I don't think.
Okay.
Maybe we should change that to many.
A
to be
high number.
clear.
Jim, did you want town council to talk about musts and shoulds at all? Any clarification on that? You
So
okay?
I just asked the town manager, that's.
The question I had actually, I asked Libby earlier, and she thought maybe Alana, you'd have a comment on it, is in our letter to the state, we started off with a paragraph about being sort of adamantly opposed to the project as is. And I think that this letter definitely tightens up some of the issues that we had, but we don't really have just a simple starting statement summarizing that as is due to the impact on the island and the infrastructure of the neighborhood. We're not we're not in favor of it. And I'm wondering if that's something that's appropriate, or if that's done, or if it was more appropriate at the state level and not for this levy.
I would say, through you, Mr. Chair, it is more appropriate at the state level than here, because as we discussed last time, the standard of review for the ZBA is in terms of denial that might occur or any imposition of one or more conditions. The issue is in the event of a denial or conditions that could render the project uneconomic, is whether there's a local concern that is so severe that it outweighs the need for the need for regional affordable housing. And because you don't have a safe harbor, there is a very strong presumption that there is no such local concern, and there's a heavy burden of proof in the event of a denial or a series of conditions that render the project uneconomic, that there is a local condition that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing. So the board certainly may have a particular position overall with regard to this project, and that was certainly appropriate to communicate to the state with regard to whether or not to even give the project eligibility letter. But now the letter has been given, that ability was provided, and so they are before the ZBA. And so the standard now that needs to be addressed by the ZBA is whether there are local concerns, as opposed to there may be heavy opposition overall because of this particular region of the town where there are already, two very large projects very close by, leading to overcrowding and density and so forth. Those are certainly very important concerns. But as we talked about last time, in order to support either a denial or the imposition of particular conditions, the ZBA will need to drill down into what the particular local concern is. And so we had talked, for instance, last time about water quality issues, and certainly it was of interest to be here and listen to the water issues being discussed this evening. Although I did check, and I understand that there is no moratorium on the horizon that's anticipated to be sought, and that's really the level at which that likely would have to go before that would be of use. But with regard to the water quality issues, that's very important as well. And so the board had talked last time and had asked the town manager to go out and look to see whether there would be someone who could be hired, and we have an expert who could come in and look at and evaluate the waivers that have been requested with regard to water quality issues. This is in a wellhead protection district, as you know. And the town manager asked me last week for some names, and I think we talked last time, even with the board, about Horsley and Witten, and she did ask me to go back to Horsley and Witten, which I did last week. I called them, asked them, told them what the issue was. They said that they would get right back to me, and they did get right back to me the same day, and said that unfortunately they are not available. So the pursuit of that issue to identify an expert who could assist this board with providing an expert opinion to the ZBA as an interested party is still out there, and so that search continues. And that particular issue goes to a very specific part of the zoning bylaw that says that in this particular district, a use can happen as of right, provided that either there is not more than 15% impervious surface, or if there is, that they provide 95% recharge of the annual precipitation rate. And so we're in that range now because they have asked for a waiver of that requirement, but they haven't been specific. When the initial waiver came in, the initial waiver set, I advised the board and the ZBA immediately acted on my advice and said to the applicant, we need you to be more specific about your waivers. And they did come back in with a more specific set of waivers on June the 13th, which was helpful to an extent. But with regard to this particular issue, it really is the same as it was before, which is just that they're looking for a waiver from that requirement. And clearly they are over 15%. They're at 48%. So obviously it's 3 times what would be allowed. But they haven't said really what their waiver is about, because you can have more than 15% impervious if you do the 95% recharge. And they have not said what that recharge would be. So it would be very useful for the board, once you know what that waiver really is about, because that hasn't been drilled down into yet, to then try to appoint someone once you know what that is, because right now you don't know what you would really fully be asking your expert to do. And it is not imperative this evening that you finalize that. Certainly, your comments are important to have ready, and you do have them ready. You tasked that go forward, and that part has been done. And I believe you did already approve the traffic study, the independent traffic study. But with regard to the water issue, that may be something that you could wait a bit on, and certainly continue to see what other experts may be available out there to assist. And when
Can I stop you there for a second? I'm just trying to, so the paragraph in the beginning isn't needed? So go back to the original question. It's not needed as much? Would you still like to see something like that?
It was to me, it was just sort of a quick summary for the ZBA to state that, we do feel there is significant negative impact of the project as is. That's what I would, because that summarizes that sort of the musts and the shoulds for me to make it clear our position. So I would like to see it. I don't know how other board members feel.
I don't see it hurting anything, and if it's a similar paragraph in the letter we sent to the state, I don't think it's a big deal.
And as
Or
long as
maybe
it's
it is.
not, well, and I think that's the question is whether or not it's appropriate.
It may be. So I think that,
Yeah.
I think.
Is that what you're?
the point that I'm making is that at this juncture, what the ZBA needs to do, what its standard of review now is to determine whether there is one or more, local concern or concerns that are out there that outweighs the regional need for affordable housing.
So what you're saying is that any sort of paragraph like that is really irrelevant at this stage.
It's not. It doesn't speak to the standard that the ZBA needs to apply.
Right.
And I think what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing right, is that we need to support the ZBA fully if they need not just peer review, if we need to actually have a real someone on our side looking at the standard and looking at things. Once they give us enough detail on the water, for example, we need to be able to show, is it going to be harmful or not? And someone has to be able to model that and tell you that.
Exactly.
So whatever issue, what I would hope this board would do is whatever issues like that are at that level and that standard, we should support the ZBA and make sure they have that information. Because they're in a tough situation, where they're going to have to be reactive to what's coming to them. They may need some horsepower to make their case on certain issues.
And that was the purpose of the discussion we initiated last week.
I understand, and I'm just reiterating that.
No, I agree.
So that we do that.
So
Which we've changed. We've moved a lot of money to have it available to do it.
Yeah.
I think
And just to sort of reiterate a little bit of what Alana was saying is that we identified the wellhead protection zone as being one of the biggest concerns, and there has been a little bit of a hang up with finding the firm to do that, but we are still looking for someone. Yeah.
Yeah, I just need to be very, very clear on what their scope is.
And to speak to that just for a moment, that scope isn't, it can be defined, but you don't have enough information to know exactly what the waiver is at this point. They've asked for a waiver of this particular bylaw, and as I mentioned, we can see that it's more than 15% impervious surface, but there is the other part of the bylaw which says you need to recharge to 95% of annual recharge on the site, and I don't know where they are with that. They haven't said what kind of waiver they're looking for there. And that's where this board can be extremely helpful to the ZBA, once that is known, to have someone do a study of that and its impact on your resource. Because of course, if it's not 95%, if it's only 90%, then you need an expert to assist the ZBA to say, look, this is why this bylaw is so important, this is why this resource is so important, and to go out and look at all of the water reports. Andrew Vorse indicated the last time that we met that there are a number of studies out there, and a member of the public actually mentioned one or more of them as well. So that expert would collect all of those things, look at the current water testing that you're doing, look at all of that, and then put it together, and then give a report and an opinion, a primary opinion, as opposed to peer review, to say this 5% deviation or 10% or 30%, whatever it turns out to be, this is why it's harmful, this is how it's harmful.
So we could do that separate. We could finalize this letter today and still continue to support
Exactly.
the ZBA when
Completely
needed.
separate, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we want to kind of separate those, focus on the letter, and then also,
that's fine.
it's not really on the agenda of the other items, but it's relative.
I had no other comments on the letter.
Okay. Either, Matt, anybody else?
no.
So do we need a vote to send it? I'll make a motion that we send the letter to the ZBA with the changes outlined in the packet.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, so that's what was on the agenda was the letter. And then we had, we got in committee reports. Was there any other thoughts or comments on traffic study? We can make those without deliberation. Any committee reports? Anybody have any?
Affordable Housing Trust met and put together their letter for the ZBA as well, and it was similar vein, and acknowledging that although our mission is to be involved in affordable housing, that there are major concerns about the project.
I read the letter.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
Any other comments? Good.
NP and EDC met, and I spoke about some of it already tonight. So
The work group that's been working to develop the development agreement with Harbor Place is meeting on the 18th. The work group that is the intermodal work group looking at an intermodal center, we had come up with a recommendation. The people sitting on that group, which were owners' representatives and board members and planning folks, and we I think we made that at the end of May, that recommendation, and we asked the owners' representatives to take that back to their owners, and we were going to meet to finalize that in early June. They asked that meeting be canceled or postponed, and we're still waiting to hear from them on what their reaction to this. We think they may be proposing another alternative, another site, another location on that site, but we may hear more about that when we meet with them next week.
So some items coming up on your next agenda for the July 25th include the adoption of the special town meeting warrant. You've got at least a couple of public hearings right now that are minor, telephone petitions. Monthly town management report, and Save Our Sound, that group is coming in to make a request of the board to support a position regarding wind power in the sound. And right now, I think that's most of the major items, but the agenda's not closed yet, so that's just a bit of a preview.
I just wanted to reiterate things that Janet was saying for downtown and DPW for the water fight and all the activities. I always try to take any of my staff that's never seen it before and try to push in front of water, and it's always fun. But I also, now in this role, and watching water balloons and everything, it definitely was less. Awesome. But we really need to continue to do it. There was a water balloon that was one of the gentlemen who was holding one of the hoses, not the firefighters, on the other side, was hit in the face with a water balloon. And they turned it off and stopped and said, "Come here." And they grabbed them all, took them away from the kids. And the father came and they had to talk it all out. But I mean, that's what happens with water balloons. The other thing that I saw, and this is when we left halfway through, when all the water starts going down Main Street, the kids go down to the dirty water, pull it into the water guns, and they shoot everybody in the face. That's when we took off, because I just didn't want, I don't know, just want to get that kind of water in my face. Is there a way, I don't want to stop this, to have bigger areas of water that's filled up, that's somewhat clean, that all the kids can go and pull out of? I know they do that at the top of Main Street. Just kind of throwing that out there. It was just, we had to go.
I'm hearing that could be problematic
Could it? Okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm just trying to find another way.
logistically and.
But then
we got dunk tanks.
Oh yeah, that's real clean.
There's a lot of noise coming from outside.
And the DPW was there, and it was cleaned up fast. And I was there the next day looking for all the balloon shards, and there was way less than before. It was really good because it rained 2 days after that, and it washed everything down to the drain. So it was a good effort on everybody's part.
Yeah.
Last thing, Cape Cod Times did a article on social media usage by municipalities in Cape and Islands. And it was showing all the difficulties that different towns are having. And then halfway through, it talks about the municipality that's furthest ahead of the game is Nantucket with social media and outreach, mostly social media outreach. So
Great.
I I shot Greg Tibnan because he's the one who really pushed that years ago. And it's still going on with Florencia. So sometimes we don't ever think we're doing enough, but yep, that was in there too.
I took a semi-retirement just for 2 months there, but I'm gonna get back in the game. So,
But we always think we don't do enough, but when you compare it to other towns, we're further ahead. I just want to remind us that we're doing a good job in that area. And that's all I have.
to know. Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
all
you.
for coming. Thank you, Phil. Oh. Thank you, Tom Dixon, for coming. I was going to announce you. If anybody had any questions for Tom?